Two screws on a hospital vent sat crooked, just enough to mean someone was going to die. And the quietest nurse on the floor was the only one who understood why. The maintenance schedule said that vent had been serviced 3 days ago. Tessa Hale knew it hadn't. She'd worked this hallway for 11 months straight, third shift, the shift nobody wanted. She knew every crack in the ceiling tile, every hum in the electrical panels, every rhythm of footsteps that belonged and the ones that didn't. And she knew those screws had been tight yesterday morning. Now they hung loose, misaligned, and if you listened close enough through the white noise of monitors and murmured conversations, you could hear something breathe behind the grate. Not air, something heavier. Chemical. Nobody else noticed. They never did. If you're watching this, I need you to stay until the very end. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. Subscribe if you want to know how someone invisible became the only person who mattered. Because what happened at Black Ridge Trauma Center that night didn't just flip one life upside down, it exposed a betrayal that went back years, buried under silence and rank. And it all started with a dog that wouldn't leave. The call came at 9:47 p.m., right when Tessa was finishing her medication rounds on the 4th floor ICU. Dispatch didn't ask. They ordered. Hale, room 428. Patient brought in an unauthorized service animal. Admin wants it removed. Now. Tessa set down the tablet she'd been using to log vitals and walked toward the elevator without argument. She didn't bother asking questions. Questions implied you had a voice. In a hospital like Black Ridge, where surgical residents screamed at junior nurses over charting errors and department heads treated support staff like furniture, Tessa had learned long ago that silence bought you less trouble. She'd been working at Black Ridge Trauma Center in Millerton for almost a year now, taking the overnight shifts nobody else wanted, the ones that paid marginally better but destroyed your sleep schedule and left you hollow-eyed by morning. The other nurses barely knew her name. The doctors didn't make eye contact. She existed in that strange space between useful and invisible, competent enough to handle the work, forgettable enough that no one asked questions about where she'd come from or why someone with her skill set was working nights at a mid-tier trauma center instead of pursuing something better. That was exactly how she wanted it. Room 428 sat at the end of the East Wing, isolated from the main flow of traffic. High security clearance, military patient. The kind of case where even the attending physicians didn't get full chart access unless someone from outside the hospital cleared them first. When she reached the door, she could hear the growl before she touched the handle. Low, controlled, not aggressive, warning. Tessa paused, hand hovering near the frame, and inhaled slowly. She recognized that sound, not from nursing school, from somewhere older, somewhere she didn't talk about. She pushed the door open. The dog sat at the foot of the hospital bed, a Belgian Malinois with a scarred muzzle and eyes that tracked her the instant she stepped inside. Military working dog, fully trained. The kind of animal that didn't react to strangers unless it had been taught to assess threats on instinct. The patient, mid-30s, bandaged shoulder, too alert for someone post-op, watched her just as carefully. "They send you to kick him out?" His voice was rough but steady. No fear, just annoyance. Tessa glanced at the chart clipped to the wall. Name: Lieutenant Marcus Drain. Admitted 14 hours ago. Shrapnel wound. Surgery completed. Stable condition. Notes flagged him as a special operations transfer, which explained the private room and the lack of visitor logs. "They did," Tessa said quietly. She didn't move closer. The dog's ears hadn't relaxed. "Good luck with that." "I'm not here to fight your dog, Lieutenant. I'm here because hospital policy doesn't allow animals in patient rooms unless they're certified service animals registered with administration." "He is certified." "Not with Black Ridge." Marcus leaned back against the pillow, jaw tight. "So you're just following orders?" Tessa met his eyes. "I don't make the rules?" "That's what everyone says." The dog shifted slightly, nose angling toward the air vent above the bed. Tessa's gaze followed without thinking. The screws, still crooked. And now, this close, she could see a faint discoloration along the edge of the vent cover, oxidation that hadn't been there during her last shift. Her pulse didn't spike. It never did anymore. But something cold settled in her chest. "When did they bring you in, Sai?" she asked, voice unchanged. Marcus frowned. This morning. Why? Has anyone accessed that vent since you've been here? What? The air vent above your bed. Has anyone opened it? He looked up, confused. I don't know. I've been asleep half the day. Tessa stepped closer, ignoring the dog's growl this time. She moved to the side of the bed and stood on the lower rail, reaching up toward the vent. Marcus started to object, but she wasn't listening anymore. The screws weren't just loose. They'd been removed and replaced recently. Wrong threading, wrong torque. Whoever put them back didn't care about matching the original installation. They cared about speed. She pressed her fingers along the edge of the vent cover and felt warmth. Not from airflow, from something else. The dog barked once, sharp and urgent. Tessa dropped back to the floor and turned to Marcus. Do you trust that animal? With my life. Then you need to listen to me very carefully. Don't move, don't touch anything, and don't let anyone else in this room until I come back. What the hell are you talking about? Tessa was already halfway to the door. She didn't run. Running drew attention. Instead, she walked with the same measured pace she always used, the kind that made people forget she'd even passed by. She reached the nurse's station and picked up the desk phone, dialing an extension that didn't appear on any hospital directory. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. Identification. Tessa turned her back to the hallway, voice low. This is Hale. Black Ridge Trauma, 4th floor. I need a sweep team on site. Possible IED, active room, occupied. Silence. Then, confirm your status. Inactive, civilian cover. But I know what I'm looking at. Another pause, longer this time. Hold position. Team inbound. ETA, 12 minutes. The line went dead. Tessa set the phone down and turned back toward the hallway. The charge nurse, a sharp-eyed woman named Bryn Collier who'd been working Black Ridge for 15 years, was staring at her from across the station. Who were you calling? Maintenance, Tessa said evenly. Room 428 has a vent issue. Bryn's expression didn't change. Maintenance doesn't work through internal extensions. They do when it's an emergency. What kind of emergency? Tessa didn't answer. She walked past Bryn and headed back toward the east wing, feeling the other nurse's gaze burning into her back. She didn't care. She had 12 minutes to make sure that rooms stayed sealed and that hallway stayed clear. Bryn had worked at Black Ridge longer than anyone else on the floor. She knew the hospital inside and out, knew which doctors played favorites, and which administrators cut corners on safety inspections to save budget. She also had a habit of asking too many questions when things didn't add up, and right now, Tessa could feel those questions forming behind her like a gathering storm. When she reached 428 again, Marcus was sitting up, the dog now standing at full attention beside the bed. Start talking, he said. Tessa closed the door behind her and locked it. That vent's been tampered with. Someone installed something inside it within the last 72 hours. Your dog knows it, and if I'm right, we've got about 10 minutes before someone realizes I made a call I wasn't supposed to make. Marcus stared at her. Who the hell are you? Right now, nobody, but I used to be EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. I know what a rigged vent looks like, and I know what happens when people ignore the signs. His face shifted, not disbelief, but recognition. You're military. Was. Why are you here? Because I wanted to disappear. The dog barked again, sharper this time, and Tessa's attention snapped back to the vent. The faint chemical smell was stronger now. Not gas, not smoke. Something else. Something stable, until it wasn't. Marcus swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the IV still taped to his arm. If there's a bomb in this room, we need to evacuate. No, we lock down. If we move, whoever planted it knows we're on to them. And if they're watching this floor, they'll detonate remotely the second they see an evacuation start. So we just sit here? We wait for the people I called. And if they don't get here in time? Tessa looked at him, her voice calm and cold. Then I disarm it myself. Marcus didn't argue. He'd worked with enough specialists to know when someone wasn't bluffing. The minutes crawled. Tessa stood near the door, listening to the sounds outside. Footsteps, carts rolling past, distant conversations. Normal hospital noise, nothing out of place. She thought about the last time she'd done this. Bagdara Province, 18 months ago. A village school wired with enough explosives to level half the block. She'd gone in alone while her team held perimeter, Worked for 40 minutes in 100-degree heat with her hands steady and her mind screaming. She'd gotten everyone out. But 2 weeks later, 3 members of her unit were dead in an ambush that intelligence said shouldn't have happened. Someone had sold them out. Someone on the inside. She'd never proven it, but she'd felt it, the way you feel a storm coming before the sky turns dark. That was when she'd walked away, until she heard the elevator chime at the end of the hall. She moved to the small window in the door and looked out through the glass. 3 men stepped off the elevator, dressed in maintenance uniforms, moving with precision that didn't match their appearance. One of them carried a toolbox. Another had a radio clipped to his belt. The third was looking directly at room 428. Tessa stepped back from the door. "They're here," she said quietly. Marcus stood, the dog moving in front of him instantly. "Your people?" "No." The footsteps stopped outside the door. A knock followed. 2 sharp raps, professional and courteous. "Maintenance, we got a call about a vent issue in this room." Tessa didn't answer. The voice outside shifted, less friendly now. "Ma'am, we need to access the room." Marcus looked at her. Tessa shook her head once. The doorknob rattled, locked. Then came the sound of a key sliding into the override slot. Tessa moved fast. She grabbed the desk chair and wedged it under the handle just as the lock disengaged. The door pushed inward an inch, then stopped against the chair. "Step back from the door." The voice outside wasn't polite anymore. Marcus positioned himself between Tessa and the door, the dog's growl filling the small room. Tessa's mind was already running through options. The window didn't open. The room had no secondary exit. And if those men forced their way in, she had maybe 5 seconds before everything went to hell. The door shuddered as someone shoved against it from the other side. And then, from somewhere down the hall, came the unmistakable sound of boots hitting tile at a full sprint. Not sneakers, not hospital clogs, combat boots. The men outside the door heard it too. One of them swore. Tessa heard the toolbox hit the floor, followed by the snap of something metallic being drawn. Then the hallway exploded into motion. Tessa couldn't see it, but she could hear everything. The shouted commands, the impact of bodies against walls, the sharp crack of something hitting bone. It lasted less than 20 seconds. Then silence. A new voice came from outside the door, hard and authoritative. "Hale, it's clear. Open up." Tessa pulled the chair away and unlocked the door. Standing in the hallway were 4 soldiers in full tactical gear, weapons trained on 3 men, now zip-tied and face down on the floor. One of the soldiers, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running across his jaw, lowered his rifle and looked at Tessa with an expression that was part relief, part frustration. "Staff Sergeant," he said, "you couldn't stay out of trouble for 1 year?" Tessa didn't smile. "The vent? It's live." The man's expression shifted instantly. He turned to his team. "EOD up. Now." 2 of the soldiers moved past Tessa into the room, already pulling equipment from their packs. One of them glanced at Marcus, then at the dog, and gave a single nod of acknowledgement before climbing onto the bed to access the vent. The lead soldier, Captain Rains, Tessa remembered his name now, stepped closer to her, voice low. "You want to tell me what you're doing in a civilian hospital?" "Living quietly." "That's over now." Tessa didn't argue. She watched as the EOD techs carefully removed the vent cover, revealing a compact device wired into the ductwork. Small, professional, the kind of thing that wouldn't show up on a standard security sweep. One of the techs spoke without looking away from the device. "This is military grade, remote detonation, signal jammer active. Whoever built this knew what they were doing." Rains looked at Tessa. "This wasn't random." "I know. They weren't here for the lieutenant." Tessa's jaw tightened. "I know that too." Marcus, still standing near the bed with his dog, finally spoke up. "Someone want to explain what the hell is going on?" Rains glanced at him, then back at Tessa. "Your nurse used to be one of the best bomb techs in the unit. She disappeared 11 months ago after a mission went bad. Officially, she's retired. Unofficially," he trailed off, letting the implication hang. "Unofficially," Tessa finished, "someone's been hunting the survivors." The room went quiet except for the faint clicking of tools as the EOD tech worked. Marcus stared at her. "How many survivors?" "There were 6 of us on that mission. 3 are dead, 2 are missing." "And you're the 6th, Tessa nodded. One of the techs called out from the bed. Device is stable. I can disarm it, but I need another 4 minutes. Rains checked his watch, then turned to Tessa. We're taking you out of here, tonight. No. That's not a request. I'm not leaving until I know who sent them. Tessa nodded toward the men on the floor. And I'm not running anymore. Rains studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. But you're staying in protective custody until we clear this. Tessa didn't argue this time. She knew how this worked. The EOD tech finished disarming the device and carefully extracted it from the vent, placing it into a containment case. Rains immediately radioed for a full security lockdown of the hospital and ordered his team to begin sweeping the rest of the building. As the soldiers moved to secure the hallway, Tessa turned back to Marcus. Your dog saved your life, she said quietly. Marcus looked down at the Malinois, then back at her. Pretty sure you did that. He noticed first. Maybe. But you're the one who made the call. Tessa didn't respond. She was already thinking ahead, running through the variables. Whoever planted that device had access to the hospital. They knew which room Marcus was in. They knew the maintenance schedule. And they knew Tessa was here, which meant someone on the inside had given them everything they needed. The charge nurse, Bryn, appeared at the doorway, eyes wide as she took in the soldiers, the zip-tied men, and the containment case. What is going on? She demanded. Rain stepped in front of her, blocking her view of the room. This floor is under a federal jurisdiction. You need to clear your staff and patients from this wing immediately. I'm the charge nurse. I have authority over... Not anymore. Rains didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. Move your people. Now. Bryn's face flushed, but she didn't argue. She turned and hurried back toward the nurse's station, already barking orders into her radio. Tessa watched her go, something cold settling in her gut. Bryn had been at the desk when Tessa made the call. She'd questioned the maintenance excuse, and now she was the first person to show up after the soldiers arrived. Coincidence? Or surveillance? Tessa caught Rains's eye and tilted her head toward the hallway. He followed her out of the room, leaving 2 soldiers to guard Marcus. The charge nurse, Tessa said quietly. Bryn Collier. She was watching me when I made the call, and she asked too many questions. Rains pulled out a small tablet and typed quickly. We'll run her. But if she's involved, she's not the only one. This kind of operation takes coordination. I know. Tessa glanced back at the room. They weren't just after me. They wanted Marcus, too. Why? Because he was part of the same unit. Different mission, same chain of command. Tessa's breath caught. They're targeting everyone who worked under Colonel Garrett. Rains nodded grimly. We figured that out 2 weeks ago. That's why we flagged Marcus when he got transferred here. We were hoping to use him as bait. You used him without telling him? We didn't expect them to move this fast. Rains met her eyes. And we didn't know you were here until you made that call. Tessa felt the weight of it settle over her. She'd spent 11 months invisible, working a job nobody noticed, living in a studio apartment nobody visited. She'd thought she was safe, but safe was an illusion. And now the people who wanted her dead knew exactly where to find her. One of the soldiers approached Rains holding a phone. Sir, we just pulled this off one of the suspects. It's encrypted, but the last received message came in 4 minutes ago. Rains took the phone and read the screen. His expression darkened. What is it? Tessa asked. Rains turned the phone toward her. The message was short. Just 3 words. She knows. Activate contingency. Tessa's heart didn't race. It never did, but her hands went cold. Contingency, she repeated. That's not about the bomb. No. Rains was already moving, shouting orders to his team. Lock down the entire hospital, no one in or out, and get me a full roster of every staff member who's been on shift in the last 72 hours. Tessa grabbed his arm. If they have a contingency, it means there's another device, or another target. I know. Where? Rains didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because at that exact moment, somewhere 3 floors below them, the fire alarm began to scream. The sound cut through the building like a blade, high-pitched and relentless. Tessa's instincts kicked in immediately. Not the nursing training that told her to guide patients toward exits, but the combat training that told her fire alarms in tactical situations were either distractions or triggers. Rains was already on his radio. All units, sound off. I need eyes on every stairwell and exit. No one moves until we confirm this isn't a secondary device. Tessa turned toward the elevators, but Rains caught her shoulder. Where do you think you're going? First floor. That's where the alarm originated. You're not cleared for... I'm the only person in this building who knows what to look for. Tessa pulled free. And if they're using the alarm to move people into a kill zone, we've got maybe 2 minutes before it goes off. Rains hesitated for half a second, then swore under his breath. Fine, but you take Mitchell with you. He gestured to one of the soldiers, a wiry man with sharp eyes. Stay on comms. Anything looks wrong, you call it in. Tessa didn't wait for further approval. She headed for the stairwell, Mitchell falling in behind her. The alarm was still screaming, and she could already hear the shuffle of footsteps above and below as staff began evacuating patients. The stairwell was chaos. Nurses guiding patients in wheelchairs down the steps, orderlies carrying IV poles, a doctor shouting instructions that no one could hear over the alarm. Tessa pushed through, ignoring the protests, her eyes scanning every corner, every vent, every junction box. Mitchell stayed close, weapon ready but angled down to avoid panicking civilians. They hit the first floor landing, and Tessa paused, listening. The alarm was louder here, more insistent, but underneath it she could hear something else, a faint mechanical hum that didn't belong. She moved toward the sound, pushing through the emergency exit into the main lobby. The space was packed with people, patients, visitors, staff, all funneling toward the main entrance, where security was trying to organize an orderly evacuation. Tessa's gaze swept the room, looking for anything out of place. And then she saw him, a man in a hospital security uniform standing near the west corridor, not helping with the evacuation. Just watching. His hand rested on his radio, but he wasn't using it. He was waiting. Tessa tapped Mitchell's arm and nodded toward the man. Mitchell followed her gaze, then spoke quietly into his comms. Possible hostile, west corridor, security uniform, male, mid-40s, dark hair. The man's head turned slightly, as if he'd heard something. Then his eyes locked onto Tessa. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he ran. Tessa bolted after him, Mitchell shouting into his radio as he followed. The man shoved through the crowd, knocking over a wheelchair, sending a tray of medications crashing to the floor. Tessa vaulted over the debris, her focus locked on his back. He turned into the west corridor, a narrow hallway that led to the hospital's service wing. Tessa knew this area: loading docks, storage rooms, mechanical access, places where civilians didn't go, places where you could hide a bomb. The man hit a door at the end of the corridor and disappeared through it. Tessa reached it seconds later, slamming it open with her shoulder. She found herself in a large storage room filled with medical supplies, boxes stacked to the ceiling, shelving units creating narrow aisles. The man was somewhere inside, and the mechanical hum she'd heard earlier was louder here, much louder. Mitchell came through the door behind her, weapon raised. Do you see him? No, but I hear it. Hear what? Tessa moved deeper into the room, following the sound. It was coming from the back wall, behind a stack of supply crates. She pushed them aside, revealing a ventilation panel that had been removed. Inside the duct, wired to the building's HVAC system, was a device 3 times the size of the one in Marcus's room. Get Rains, Tessa said, her voice flat. Now. Mitchell was already on the radio. Tessa knelt in front of the device, her hand steady as she pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and examined the wiring. Military grade, remote detonation. But this one had a secondary trigger, a pressure sensor wired to the HVAC system. If the system tried to shut down, the device would detonate automatically. They're using the fire alarm, Tessa said aloud, more to herself than to Mitchell. They knew we'd try to evacuate, knew we'd shut down the HVAC to contain any potential fire. The second someone hits that switch, this goes off. Can you disarm it? I don't know yet. Behind her, she heard the faint scrape of a boot on concrete. She turned just in time to see the man in the security uniform step out from behind a shelving unit, a pistol in his hand. Don't move, he said. Mitchell's weapon snapped up, but the man was faster. He fired once, the shot echoing through the storage room. Mitchell went down, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his uniform. Tessa didn't freeze. She launched herself forward, closing the distance before the man could adjust his aim. Her shoulder hit his midsection, driving him backward into the shelving unit. The pistol went off again, the bullet ricocheting off metal. They hit the ground hard, Tessa on top. She drove her elbow into his jaw, snapping his head to the side, then grabbed his wrist and slammed it against the concrete floor until the pistol skittered away. The man bucked, trying to throw her off, but Tessa shifted her weight and locked her forearm across his throat. "Who sent you?" she hissed. He didn't answer, just smiled, blood on his teeth. Tessa pressed harder. "Who sent you?" "You already know," he gasped. "You've always known." Behind her, she heard boots pounding down the corridor. Rains burst through the door, soldiers flanking him, weapons trained on the man beneath Tessa. "Secure him," Rains ordered. 2 soldiers moved in, pulling the man away from Tessa and zip-tying his hands behind his back. Rains helped Tessa to her feet, then moved to Mitchell, who was sitting against the wall, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "Medic, now!" Tessa turned back to the device. "We've got a bigger problem." Rains joined her, his face going pale as he took in the size of the bomb. "How long do we have?" "I don't know, but if anyone tries to shut down the HVAC, it detonates." "Can you disarm it?" "Maybe, but I need time." Rains pulled out his radio. "All units, maintain full building lockdown. Do not touch any environmental controls. Repeat, do not shut down HVAC." He turned back to Tessa. "How much time?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if I'm lucky." "What do you need?" "Wire cutters, needle nose pliers, and everyone out of this room except you." Rains didn't argue. He barked orders, and within 30 seconds the room was clear except for the 2 of them. One of the soldiers handed Tessa a small toolkit before retreating. Tessa knelt in front of the device again, her mind shifting into the cold, mechanical focus that had kept her alive through dozens of situations just like this. She traced the wiring with her eyes, identifying the power source, the trigger mechanism, the fail-safes. "Talk to me," Rains said quietly. He was standing behind her, far enough to give her space, close enough to hear. 2 trigger systems, Tessa said, her hands already moving. "Primary is remote detonation. Secondary is the pressure sensor on the HVAC. If I cut the primary, the secondary activates. If I cut the secondary, the primary detonates." "So how do you disarm it?" "I don't. I isolate the power source and kill both systems simultaneously." "And if you're wrong?" "Then we both die." Rains was quiet for a moment. "You know, when you disappeared, we all thought you'd cracked, that the mission broke you." "It did. But you're still here." "I didn't have a choice." Tessa carefully stripped the insulation from a wire, exposing the copper beneath. 3 people are dead because someone sold us out. And whoever it was, they're still out there." "You think it's someone in command?" "I know it is." Tessa connected a bypass wire, rerouting the current away from the trigger mechanism. "The only people who knew our mission parameters were us and Colonel Garrett's staff. And since we're the ones getting killed, that narrows it down pretty fast." Rains swore softly. "Garrett's dead. Heart attack 6 months ago." "Convenient." "You think someone killed him?" "I think someone made sure he couldn't talk." Tessa cut another wire, watching the device's indicator light flicker. "And now they're cleaning up the rest of the loose ends." She worked in silence for another 3 minutes, her hands steady, her breathing controlled. The device was elegant in its brutality, designed by someone who understood not just explosives, but psychology. The kind of bomb that made you second-guess every decision. Finally, she reached the power source. A small lithium battery wired into both trigger systems with redundant connections. If she pulled it too fast, the sudden voltage drop would activate the secondary. If she cut the wrong wire first, the primary would detonate. "Rains," she said quietly. "If this goes wrong, make sure Marcus gets out, and find the other 2 survivors before they end up like the rest of us." "Tessa, just promise me." "I promise." Tessa took a breath, then moved. She cut the first wire, then the second, then pulled the battery free in one smooth motion. The indicator light went dark. The mechanical hum stopped. The room fell silent except for the distant wail of the fire alarm. Tessa sat back on her heels, her hands still steady, and set the battery down carefully beside the device. "It's done," she said. Rains let out a breath he'd been holding. "You're sure?" "Yeah." He keyed his radio. "Device is disarmed. I repeat, device is disarmed. Begin evacuation protocols, and somebody shut off that damn alarm." Within seconds, the fire alarm cut off, Leaving the building in an eerie quiet, Tessa stood, her legs shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was starting to fade. Rains put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good." "I did my job." "You did more than that." Tessa didn't respond. She was staring at the device, her mind already running through the implications. 2 bombs in one building, 3 men in custody, and a text message that said someone was watching, waiting for her to make a move. The door opened and one of the soldiers stuck his head in. "Sir, we've got a situation upstairs." Rains tensed. "What kind of situation?" "The charge nurse, Collier. She's gone." Tessa's head snapped up. "What do you mean, gone?" "She left the building during the evacuation. Security footage shows her getting into a vehicle in the parking garage. We lost her after that." Tessa exchanged a glance with Rains. "She was the inside contact." "Looks that way." "Then she knows we disarmed the bombs, and she knows we have her people in custody." Rains pulled out his tablet, typing rapidly. "I'm putting out an APB on her vehicle. We'll find her." "No, you won't." Tessa's voice was cold. "If she's smart, she ditched the car 2 blocks from here and she's already in the wind." "So what do we do?" Tessa looked down at the disarmed device and then back at Rains. "We make her think she won." Rains frowned. "How?" "The men you have in custody. They think the bombs went off. They don't know we disarmed them." "So?" "So we let them believe it. We fake casualties. We stage the scene to make it look like the contingency plan worked. And then we wait for Collier to make contact with whoever she's working for." Rains studied her for a long moment. "That's a hell of a gamble." "It's the only way we're going to find out who's at the top of this." "And what about you? If they think you're dead, you can't exactly go back to your apartment." "I wasn't planning to." Rains sighed, then nodded. "All right, we'll do it your way, but you're staying under our protection until this is over." "Fine." "And Tessa?" Rains's expression was serious. "When we find out who's behind this, and we will, you let us handle it. No solo missions, no revenge runs. You understand?" Tessa met his eyes. "I understand." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Because whoever had killed her team, whoever had spent 11 months hunting the survivors, whoever had planted bombs in a civilian hospital, they weren't going to stop. And neither was she. Rains led her out of the storage room and back toward the main building. The lobby was still crowded with evacuated patients and staff, but now there were soldiers everywhere, controlling the perimeter, checking IDs, locking down the scene. Tessa kept her head down as they passed through, following Rains to a service elevator that took them back up to the 4th floor. Marcus was still in his room, now guarded by 4 soldiers instead of 2. When Tessa walked in, he looked up from the bed where he'd been lying with his dog curled at his feet. "You're alive," he said. "So are you." "Your captain told me what happened, said you disarmed another bomb." Tessa shrugged. "It's what I do." "Did." "Yeah, did." Marcus studied her for a moment. "So what now?" "Now we wait, and we see who comes looking for us." "You think they'll try again?" "I know they will." The dog lifted its head, looking at Tessa with those sharp, intelligent eyes. She moved closer and reached out slowly, letting the animal sniff her hand before scratching behind its ears. "He likes you," Marcus said. "He's smart." "That's why he likes you." Tessa almost smiled. Almost. Rains appeared in the doorway. "We've got the scene staged downstairs. Fake casualties, emergency response, the whole thing. As far as anyone outside this room knows, the contingency plan worked." "And the men in custody?" "Isolated. No communication. They still think their bombs went off." "Good." Rains pulled out his tablet again. "I've been running background on Collier. 15 years at Black Ridge, clean record, no red flags. But I dug deeper, found something interesting." "What?" "She's got a sister. Younger, lives in Portland. Works as an analyst for a private military contractor." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Which contractor?" "Redstone Global." The name hit Tessa like a punch. Redstone Global had been involved in the mission that went wrong 18 months ago. They'd provided intelligence support, logistics, operational oversight, and when everything went to hell, they'd been the first ones to disappear. "Collier's sister works for Redstone," Tessa said slowly, "which means Collier had access to information about our mission. And probably a direct line to whoever ordered the hit on your team. Tessa felt the pieces clicking into place. Redstone was the contractor on the Baghdar operation. They provided the intelligence that led us into that ambush. You think they sold you out? I think someone inside Redstone did, and I think they've been cleaning up ever since. Rains was already typing. I'll get a team on the sister. If Collier makes contact, we'll know. Don't just watch her. Bring her in. On what charge? Conspiracy to commit terrorism. Aiding and abetting. I don't care. Just get her off the street before she disappears, too. Rains nodded and stepped out of the room, phone already to his ear. Marcus looked at Tessa. You really think a private contractor is behind this? I think someone with money and resources is behind this. Redstone fits. But why? What's the point of killing a bunch of EOD techs? Because we saw something we weren't supposed to see. Or we know something someone doesn't want getting out. Tessa sat down in the chair next to his bed, suddenly exhausted. That mission in Baghdara, we were supposed to be clearing a school that insurgents had rigged with explosives. Standard op. But when we got inside, it wasn't insurgents. It was a weapons cache. High-end stuff. Military-grade equipment that shouldn't have been there. Black market? Maybe. Or maybe someone was running guns through that village and we stumbled onto it. Either way, 3 days after we filed our report, the ambush happened. 3 dead, 2 missing, and me hiding in a hospital hoping no one would find me. But they did. Yeah, they did. The room fell quiet. Outside, Tessa could hear the sounds of the hospital slowly returning to normal. Announcements over the PA system, the rumble of gurneys, the beep of monitors. But underneath it all, she could feel the tension, the waiting, the certainty that this wasn't over. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting a message from Rains. But it wasn't from Rains. It was from an unknown number. And the message was simple. You should have stayed hidden. Tessa stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the delete button. The message sat there, glowing in the dim light of Marcus's hospital room, and she felt the old instinct kick in, the one that said burn the phone, ditch the SIM card, disappear before sunrise. But disappearing hadn't worked. 11 months of silence, of working double shifts and keeping her head down, and they'd found her anyway. She showed the screen to Marcus without a word. He read it, his jaw tightening. That came through just now? Yeah. So they know the bombs didn't work. Or they're fishing. Tessa pocketed the phone. Either way, they know I'm alive. Marcus swung his legs off the bed, despite the IVs still attached to his arm. Then we need to move. Get you somewhere secure. I'm not running again. That's not running. That's tactics. It's the same thing. The dog stood as Marcus did, its attention fixed on the door as if it could sense something coming. Tessa felt it too. A shift in the air, a tension that hadn't been there a moment ago. Rains came back into the room, his expression grim. We've got movement. 2 vehicles just entered the hospital parking structure. No plates, tinted windows. They're not ours. Tessa was already on her feet. How many? Unknown, but they're not being subtle about it. They want us to know they're here. Tessa moved to the window, looking down at the parking structure 3 floors below. She couldn't see the vehicles from this angle, but she could see the shadows moving between the concrete pillars. Too coordinated to be random, too deliberate to be civilian. Rains pulled his sidearm and checked the magazine. We've got a route mapped to the roof. Helicopters on standby. No. Tessa turned away from the window. If we run, they'll follow. And next time they won't bother with bombs. They'll hit us in the open, where there's no cover and no witnesses. So what do you suggest? We stop them here. Marcus looked at her like she'd lost her mind. There's still patients in this building, which is why they won't use explosives. They'll come in quiet, try to make it look like something else. An accident, a medical error, something that doesn't draw attention. Rains considered this, then nodded slowly. If you're right, they'll come straight for this room. I'm counting on it. And if you're wrong, then we're dead anyway. Rains didn't argue. He stepped into the hallway and spoke quietly into his radio, repositioning his team. Tessa watched through the small window in the door as soldiers took up positions in the stairwells and at the elevator banks, their movements casual enough not to alarm the remaining hospital staff, but precise enough to lock down every approach. Marcus stood beside her, the dog pressed against his leg. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Something like it, Tessa said. Fallujah. We knew insurgents were planning to hit our base. Instead of evacuating, we let them come, set up a kill box and waited. How'd that work out? We lost 2 guys, they lost 15. Those aren't great odds. They're better than running. The minutes stretched. Tessa kept her breathing steady, her mind clear. She'd learned a long time ago that panic was just wasted energy, and energy was the one thing you couldn't afford to waste when people were trying to kill you. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. Last chance, walk away. She showed it to Rains. He frowned. They're stalling. No, they're giving themselves cover. When this goes bad, they'll say they warned me, that I had a choice. You think they're recording this? I'd bet on it. Tessa typed a response, her fingers quick and deliberate. Come and get me. She hit send and pocketed the phone. Rains shook his head. You just rang the dinner bell. Good. I'm tired of waiting. 2 floors down, a fire door opened. Tessa heard it through the ventilation system, a metallic click followed by the soft scuff of boots on concrete. Not the heavy stomp of soldiers, something lighter, tactical boots designed for silence. Rains heard it too. He raised a fist, signaling his team to hold position. The footsteps moved toward the stairwell. 4 distinct patterns. 4 people, moving in formation. Tessa's pulse stayed steady. She'd been here before. In different buildings, different countries, but always the same equation, predator and prey. The only question was who was which. The stairwell door on the 4th floor opened. Through the window, Tessa watched 4 figures emerge. They wore hospital scrubs and ID badges, but they moved wrong, too balanced, too aware. One of them carried a medical bag. Another had a tablet that glowed faintly in the dim hallway light. They walked directly toward room 428. Rains's soldiers didn't move. They stayed in position, weapons ready but out of sight, waiting for the order. The 4 figures stopped outside Marcus's door. One of them knocked, polite and professional. Mr. Drain, we're from pharmacy. We have your evening medications. Marcus looked at Tessa. She shook her head. The knock came again, more insistent. Sir, we need to administer these now. Doctor's orders. Tessa moved to the door, standing just to the side where she could see out, but they couldn't see in. The woman doing the talking was mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back, ID badge that said her name was Karen Voss. But her eyes were wrong, too sharp, too focused. Mr. Drain isn't accepting visitors right now, Tessa called through the door. The woman's expression didn't change. We're not visitors, we're medical staff. Then you can leave the medications at the nurse's station. Hospital policy requires direct administration for controlled substances. Then come back in the morning. There was a pause. Tessa watched as the woman exchanged a glance with one of the men beside her, a silent conversation, a decision being made. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to open this door. No. I can have security override the lock. Go ahead. Another pause, longer this time. Then the woman reached for her radio. Rains's voice cut through the hallway before she could key it. Step away from the door. The 4 figures turned as one, and suddenly the hospital corridor became a battlefield frozen in the instant before chaos. Rains stood at the far end of the hallway, flanked by 2 soldiers, their weapons raised but not quite pointed. The woman who'd been doing the talking kept her hand near her radio. We're hospital staff. We have orders to— You're not hospital staff. Rains's voice was flat, authoritative. And you're going to put your hands where I can see them. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the man holding the medical bag dropped it and went for something underneath his scrubs. Rains's soldiers reacted instantly, but so did the other 3. The hallway erupted, not with gunfire, which would have drawn too much attention, but with something worse. Controlled violence, brutal and silent. Tessa didn't wait to see how it played out. She threw open the door and grabbed the first person within reach, the woman who'd been doing the talking. Tessa yanked her sideways, driving her into the doorframe with enough force to crack the woman's head against the metal edge. The woman went down, stunned but not unconscious. Tessa followed her to the floor, driving a knee into her spine and wrenching her arm behind her back. Who sent you? The woman didn't answer, just twisted hard, using a joint lock Tessa recognized from military combatives training. Tessa had to release or risk a broken wrist. She let go and rolled backward as the woman came up swinging. They traded blows in the narrow space outside the door. Short, vicious strikes designed to incapacitate, not wound. The woman was good, well-trained, but Tessa had been doing this longer. She caught the woman's next punch, redirected it into the wall, and followed with an elbow to the jaw that sent the woman sprawling. Behind her, Raines's soldiers had subdued two of the others. The fourth, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, had broken free and was running toward the stairwell. Marcus's dog shot out of the room like a missile. The animal covered the distance in seconds, launching itself at the fleeing man and catching his arm in its jaws. The man screamed, swinging wildly, but the dog held on, dragging him down. By the time Raines reached them, the man was on the ground, blood streaming from a torn bicep, the dog standing over him with its teeth still bared. Tessa zip-tied the woman she'd subdued and hauled her to her feet. The woman's lip was split, blood running down her chin, but her eyes were still defiant. "You're making a mistake," the woman said. "I've made plenty. This isn't one of them. You don't know who you're dealing with. Redstone Global, private military contractor with ties to the Baghdara operation. How's that for starters?" The woman's expression flickered, just a moment of surprise before she locked it down. But it was enough. Tessa leaned closer. "Yeah, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. What I don't know is why you're stupid enough to come after me in a building full of federal witnesses. We weren't here for you. Bullshit." The woman smiled, blood on her teeth. "Check your friend's IV." Tessa's head snapped toward Marcus's room. He was still standing in the doorway, the dog back at his side, but something about his posture had changed. He was leaning against the frame, one hand pressed to his chest. "Marcus?" He looked at her, confusion in his eyes. "I don't feel right." Tessa was moving before he finished the sentence. She grabbed his arm and pulled him back into the room, her eyes going immediately to the IV bag hanging beside the bed. The fluid inside was clear, normal saline, but there was something else, a faint discoloration near the injection port, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Someone had tampered with it, recently. Tessa ripped the IV line out of Marcus's arm, ignoring his protest. "When was the last time someone changed this bag?" "I don't know. An hour ago? Maybe 2? "Who did it?" "One of the nurses. I didn't catch the name." Tessa turned back to the hallway where Raines was securing the last of the intruders. "Get a medic in here, now, and find out who accessed this room in the last 2 hours." Raines didn't waste time with questions. He radioed for a medical team and sent 2 soldiers to pull security footage. Marcus sat down heavily on the bed, his breathing labored. "What was in there?" "I don't know yet. But whatever it was, they wanted it to look natural. A complication from surgery. A reaction to medication. Something that wouldn't trigger an autopsy." "How long do I have?" "I don't know that either." The medical team arrived within minutes. 2 actual hospital doctors this time, verified by Raines's team. They started running tests immediately, drawing blood, checking vitals, asking questions Tessa couldn't answer. She stepped back into the hallway where the 4 intruders were now lined up against the wall, hands zip-tied, soldiers standing guard. The woman Tessa had fought was watching her with an expression that might have been respect if it wasn't wrapped in so much contempt. "He's going to die," the woman said. "Even if you figure out what we gave him, you won't find an antidote in time." Tessa grabbed the woman by her collar and slammed her against the wall. "What did you use?" "Something custom, something you won't find in any medical database." "Where'd you get it?" "Redstone has resources you can't imagine." "Then Redstone's going to have a problem when I start burning those resources to the ground." The woman laughed, a wet, painful sound. "You think you're the hunter here? You're not. You never were. We've been watching you for 11 months. We knew where you worked, where you lived, what you ate for breakfast. We could have killed you any time we wanted. So why didn't you?" "Because you weren't the target. You were bait." Tessa's grip tightened. "For what?" "For everyone who's been trying to protect you. Everyone who thinks you matter. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Before Tessa could respond, one of Raines's soldiers called out from down the hall. "Sir, we've got activity in the parking structure. Multiple vehicles, armed personnel deploying." Raines swore and pulled out his tablet. The security feed showed at least a dozen figures moving through the garage. Tactical gear, weapons visible, not trying to hide anymore. "They're not coming quiet this time," Raines said. Tessa released the woman and turned to him. How many people do you have in this building? 12, maybe 15 if I pull in the perimeter team. That's not enough. I know. The building's PA system crackled to life. A calm, professional voice filled the hallways. Attention all staff and patients. This is a security announcement. We are implementing a full lockdown due to a potential threat. Please remain in your current location and await further instructions. Rains looked at Tessa. That wasn't us. I know. Down in the parking structure, the tactical team was moving toward the stairwells. Tessa counted 15 figures on the security feed, all armed, all moving with military precision. One of the doctors emerged from Marcus's room, his face pale. We've identified the compound. It's a synthetic toxin, derivative of ricin. Extremely potent. He's got maybe 90 minutes before organ failure starts. Can you treat it? Not here. We don't have the antidote. We'd need to transfer him to a facility with a specialized toxicology unit. Which facility? Closest one is Riverside Medical, about 40 minutes away. Tessa looked at Rains.
Can
you get a transport? Not through that. He gestured to the security feed showing the tactical team now entering the stairwells. They'll hit the ambulance before it gets 3 blocks. Then we need another way out. One of Rains's soldiers spoke up. There's a service elevator that runs to the basement. It's used for morgue transport. Opens directly to an underground loading dock. That'll be covered too, Rains said. Probably, but it's our best option. Tessa made the decision. Get Marcus ready to move. Rains, I need 4 of your best to escort him to Riverside. The rest stay here and hold this floor. What about you? I'm staying. Like hell you are. They're here for me. If I leave, they'll follow. But if I stay, you might have a chance to get Marcus out. Rains stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're not sacrificing yourself for this. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm finishing it. Before he could argue, the lights went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, bathing the hallways in a dim red glow that turned everything into shadows and uncertain shapes. Rains was already on his radio. All units, report. Static. Then a voice, tense and low. Ground floor is compromised. We've got hostiles in the main lobby. They're not engaging, just holding position. Another voice cut in. Second floor stairwell? Same thing. They're blocking the exits but not advancing. Tessa understood immediately. They're boxing us in. They want us stuck on this floor. Why? Because whatever they're planning, it happens here. The PA system crackled again, but this time it wasn't the calm professional voice. It was something else. A man's voice, cultured and smooth. Staff Sergeant Hale, I believe we should talk. Tessa's blood went cold. She knew that voice. Had heard it in mission briefings, on encrypted calls, in the command tent where they'd planned the Baghdara operation. Major Philip Vance, Colonel Garrett's second-in-command, the man who'd been running intelligence oversight for their entire unit. You should know by now that running is pointless, Vance continued, his voice echoing through the empty hallways. I have this building locked down. I have your friend dying from a toxin only I can cure. And I have about 50 questions I'd like you to answer before I decide whether to let any of you leave here alive. Rains looked at Tessa. You know him? He was our handler, the one who sent us into Baghdara. So he's the one who sold you out. Looks that way. Vance's voice came again. I'm going to make this very simple. You come down to the lobby, alone, unarmed, and we have a conversation. If I like what you tell me, I'll give you the antidote for your friend. If I don't, well, we'll see how much suffering you can watch before you break. Tessa pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to the unknown number that had been texting her. I'm here. Let's talk. The response came immediately. 3rd floor. Conference room B. 5 minutes. Come alone or everyone dies. She showed the message to Rains. He shook his head. That's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But it's also the only way Marcus gets out of here alive. We can fight our way through. No, you can't. Vance has overwhelming force, and he's positioned to cut us off at every turn. The only advantage we have is that he wants me alive, at least for now. And when he stops wanting you alive? Then you better hope your team is fast. Tessa turned to the soldier who'd mentioned the service elevator. How long to get Marcus down to the loading dock? 3 minutes if we move fast. Do it. Rains, you go with them. Get him to Riverside and don't stop for anything. I'm not leaving you here. Yes, you are. Because if Marcus dies, this was all for nothing. Rains opened his mouth to argue, but Tessa cut him off. That's an order, Captain. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. You get 5 minutes. After that, I'm coming back for you. Fair enough? The medical team was already moving Marcus onto a gurney. He tried to sit up, but one of the doctors pushed him back down. Save your strength. Marcus grabbed Tessa's wrist as she walked past. Don't do anything stupid. Wouldn't dream of it. I'm serious. These people already killed half your unit. Don't let them make it 6 for 6. I'll do my best. She pulled free and watched as they wheeled him toward the service elevator. Rains gathered 4 soldiers and followed, the dog trotting alongside the gurney. The elevator doors closed, and they were gone. Tessa was alone in the hallway with the 4 zip-tied prisoners and 2 soldiers Rains had left behind. She looked at the woman she'd fought earlier. Vance sent you? He sent us to do what you should have done a year ago, die quietly. How's that working out for you? The woman didn't answer. Tessa turned to the soldiers. Anyone comes through those stairwell doors, you put them down. No warnings, no negotiations, just shoot. Yes, ma'am. She checked her watch. 4 minutes to get to the 3rd floor. She took the stairs, moving quickly but carefully, her senses sharp for any sign of an ambush. The 3rd floor was quiet. Too quiet. The emergency lighting cast everything in that same red glow, turning the corridor into something out of a nightmare. She found conference room B halfway down the hall, the door slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The room was empty except for a single chair in the center and a phone sitting on the conference table. As soon as she stepped inside, the phone rang. She picked it up. Tessa. Vance's voice was warm, almost friendly. It's been too long. Not long enough? I see you haven't lost your edge. That's good. I was worried 11 months of playing nurse might have softened you. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted. Clean endings. No loose threads. No witnesses who can connect dots they shouldn't be connecting. You mean the weapons cache we found in Bagdara? But I mean the operation you stumbled into without clearance or authorization. An operation that cost me significant resources and valuable relationships. You were running guns to insurgents. I was running a highly classified intelligence operation that your team compromised. Do you have any idea how long it took to establish those channels? How many people died to build that network? 3 of my people died because you ambushed us. 3 of your people died because they couldn't follow simple orders. I told Garrett to keep EOD away from that village. He sent you anyway. So you killed him too. Vance was quiet for a moment. Garrett had a heart attack. Natural causes. Right after he started asking questions about what really happened in Bagdara. Coincidence? You don't believe in coincidence? No, I don't. Which is why I'm calling you right now instead of just putting a bullet through that conference room window. Tessa glanced at the window. She couldn't see anything in the darkness outside, but she knew someone was out there. Probably with a rifle. Probably with her head in the crosshairs. So what's stopping you? She asked. Because you're not the only person who's been asking questions. And I need to know who else you've talked to. Who else knows about Bagdara? Who else is going to become a problem? I haven't talked to anyone. I don't believe you. I don't care. You should. Because right now your friend is on his way to Riverside Medical with about 70 minutes left to live. And the only person who can save him is me. Tessa's jaw tightened. What do you want? Names. Everyone you've contacted since you left the service. Everyone you've told about Bagdara. Everyone who might have information that could trace back to me. And if I give you those names? Then I make a phone call, and the antidote is waiting for your friend when he arrives at Riverside. And if I don't, then he dies. And then I start working my way through every person in this building until someone gives me what I want. Tessa closed her eyes, thinking fast. Vance had her boxed in, and he knew it. But he'd also made a mistake. He'd revealed that he was worried, that there was someone or something he was afraid of. There's no one, she said finally. I disappeared, went dark, didn't contact anyone from the unit. I'm going to need more than that. What do you want me to say? That I spent 11 months hiding in a nowhere hospital because I was scared? Fine. I was scared. You killed my team, and I didn't want to be next. But now you're not scared anymore. Now I'm pissed off. Vance laughed, a cold sound that made her skin crawl. I always liked you, Tessa. You had more spine than the rest of them combined. It's almost a shame this has to end the way it does. It doesn't have to end any particular way. Yes, it does. You see, the problem isn't that you know about Bagdara. The problem is that you represent a connection, a thread that leads back to an operation that officially never happened. And as long as that thread exists, I have a vulnerability. So you're going to kill me to tie off the loose end. Eventually. But first, you're going to help me find the other two survivors. The ones who went missing. Tessa's breath caught. They're alive? One of them is. The other, well, let's just say she wasn't as cooperative as I'd hoped. Rage flooded through Tessa, hot and vicious. You son of a... Save it. You want to save your friend, you do exactly what I tell you, starting with walking out of that conference room and getting into the vehicle that's waiting for you in the loading dock. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I detonate the secondary devices we planted in this building while you were busy playing hero upstairs. Tessa's blood turned to ice. You're bluffing. Am I? Check the parking structure camera. 5th level, northwest corner. Tessa pulled out her phone and accessed the hospital's security feed. It took her a moment to find the right camera, but when she did, her stomach dropped. There, tucked against a support column, was a device 3 times larger than anything they'd found upstairs, and the timer was counting down. 47 minutes. Tessa stared at the timer on her phone screen, watching the seconds tick down with mechanical precision. The device in the parking structure was massive, enough explosive force to collapse the entire northwest section of the building, enough to kill everyone still trapped inside. Vance's voice crackled through the phone, smooth and patient. Now that I have your attention, let's talk about cooperation. You planted a bomb in a hospital full of civilians. I planted insurance. There's a difference. Not to the people who are going to die. Then I suggest you make sure they don't. Get in the vehicle. We'll have a conversation. If it goes well, I'll make a call and the device gets disarmed. Simple. Tessa's mind was racing, calculating angles and probabilities. Vance had the advantage. Overwhelming force, strategic position, and a timer counting down to mass casualties. But he'd also made assumptions. He assumed she cared more about the people in this building than she cared about taking him down. He assumed she'd trade herself to save them. He was right. But that didn't mean she had to make it easy. Where's the vehicle? She asked. Loading dock, black SUV. The driver knows where we're going. And the antidote for Marcus? Will be delivered to Riverside the moment you get in that vehicle. You have my word. Your word isn't worth shit. Perhaps. But it's all you've got right now. Tessa ended the call and pulled up Raines's contact. She typed quickly. Vance has secondary device, parking structure, level 5, northwest corner, 46 minutes. Get everyone out. She hit send and pocketed the phone, then walked out of the conference room. The hallway was still empty, still bathed in that red emergency lighting that made everything look like a crime scene waiting to happen. She took the stairs down, moving fast but quiet. Her phone buzzed as she reached the second-floor landing. Raines's response was short and brutal. Can't evac. Vance has teams blocking exits. We're trapped. Tessa swore under her breath and kept moving. She hit the ground floor and navigated through the empty corridors toward the loading dock. The entire hospital felt like a tomb now. Power out, patients relocated, only the emergency systems keeping minimal function alive. The loading dock door was propped open, cold air spilling in from outside. A black SUV idled in the bay, exhaust visible in the frigid night. The driver's window was tinted, but Tessa could see movement inside. She approached slowly, hands visible, no weapons. The rear door opened as she got close. A man sat in the back seat, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Tessa made in a month. Major Philip Vance looked exactly like she remembered. Polished, composed, the kind of officer who'd never gotten dirt under his fingernails but had sent plenty of others into the mud. Get in, he said. Tessa climbed into the SUV. The door closed behind her with a solid thunk, sealing her in. The driver pulled out immediately, navigating through the loading area and onto the access road that wound around the hospital complex. Vance studied her with an expression that was almost friendly. "You look tired." "I've had a long night. It's about to get longer." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. "This is the feed from the device in the parking structure. As you can see, it's armed and functional. The trigger is biometric, keyed to my thumbprint. If I don't check in every 10 minutes, it detonates automatically. So if I kill you, everyone dies." "Exactly. Which means you're going to sit there, answer my questions, and hope I'm feeling generous when we're done." Tessa looked out the window as they passed through the hospital gates. Behind them, she could see Blackridge Trauma Center rising against the night sky, its windows dark except for the emergency lighting. Somewhere inside, Rains and his team were trying to figure out how to defuse a bomb without tools or time. Somewhere else, Marcus was racing toward Riverside Medical with poison in his bloodstream, and she was sitting in a vehicle with the man who'd orchestrated all of it. "The survivor you mentioned," Tessa said. "The one who's still alive. Who is it?" "Sergeant Kyle Morrison. Last I checked, he was in Denver, living under a fake identity. He's been harder to track than you were. Because he's smarter. Because he had help. Someone inside the intelligence community is protecting him. I need to know who. And you think I know?" "I think you might. Morrison was your team leader. If he went underground, he would have reached out to people he trusted." "He didn't reach out to me." "Maybe not directly, but information has a way of traveling through networks. Someone knows where he is. Someone knows who's helping him. And I'm betting you can point me in the right direction." Tessa shook her head. "I've been out of the loop for almost a year. If Morrison's in Denver, that's news to me." Vance's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Let me be clear about something. I don't need you to tell me the truth. I just need you to tell me something useful. If you can do that, we both walk away from this. If you can't..." He gestured vaguely toward the hospital, now receding in the distance. "Well, accidents happen. You're going to blow that building anyway." "Am I?" "You've killed everyone else connected to Bagdara. Why would you leave a building full of witnesses?" "Because witnesses to what? A domestic terrorism incident? An attack by unknown assailants? As far as anyone knows, this was a random act of violence. Tragic, but unconnected to anything else. Rains knows who you are. Captain Rains is about to have a very unfortunate encounter with my tactical team. By the time anyone finds his body, the story will already be written." Tessa felt rage building in her chest, hot and vicious, but she kept her voice level. "You really think you can cover this up?" "I've covered up worse. Bagdara was 100 times more complicated and it disappeared without a trace. One hospital bombing? That's a Tuesday." The SUV turned onto a service road that led away from the main highway, heading into an industrial area where the streetlights were sparse and the buildings were dark. Tessa recognized the route. This was the warehouse district on the east side of Millerton, a place where dock workers and freight companies operated during the day but abandoned at night. Vance tapped his tablet again. 42 minutes. Let's pick up the pace, shall we? Tell me about your contact inside the VA system." "I don't have a contact inside the VA." "You accessed Morrison's medical records 3 months ago. Don't bother denying it. I have the logs." Tessa's mind scrambled. She hadn't accessed anything, but someone had, using her credentials. "That wasn't me." "Then who was it?" "I don't know." Vance leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. "Here's what I think happened. Morrison reached out to you through a back channel, maybe an encrypted message, maybe a third party. He asked you to check if his records had been flagged. You did. And in doing so, you left a trail. If that's what you think, why are you asking me?" "Because I want to know who else is involved. Who helped you access those records? Who's been running interference for Morrison while he's been hiding in Denver?" Tessa stared at him, piecing it together. Vance wasn't just hunting survivors. He was hunting the network that was protecting them. Someone inside the system had been helping Morrison stay off the grid, and Vance was terrified that someone would eventually connect the dots back to him. "You're not worried about Morrison," Tessa said slowly. "You're worried about whoever's been keeping him alive." Vance smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "Very good. I see 11 months of obscurity didn't dull your instincts. So who is it? Who's protecting him?" If I knew that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But here's what I do know. Someone with significant access has been scrubbing records, redirecting inquiries, and making sure certain names don't appear in certain databases. Someone who knows how the system works and how to manipulate it. And you think Morrison told me who it is? I think Morrison wouldn't have survived this long without telling someone. And you're the most logical candidate. The SUV slowed and turned into a parking lot surrounded by chain-link fencing. A warehouse loomed ahead, its loading bays sealed, its windows dark. The driver pulled around to the back entrance and stopped. Vance gestured toward the building. Let's continue this inside, more privacy. Tessa climbed out of the vehicle, Vance right behind her. Two armed men emerged from the shadows, flanking them as they walked toward a side door. The men were professional, no insignia, no identifying marks, just tactical gear and weapons held with the kind of casual competence that said they'd done this before. Inside, the warehouse was exactly what Tessa expected. Empty except for a few pieces of furniture arranged in the center. A table, two chairs, a portable generator humming in the corner. Work lights on stands cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor. And standing near this table, zip-tied to a chair with blood running down the side of his face, was a man Tessa recognized instantly. Sergeant Kyle Morrison looked like hell. His nose was broken, his left eye swollen shut, and his breathing was labored. But when he saw Tessa, something flickered in his expression, recognition, followed by something that might have been relief or resignation. "Tessa," he said, his voice rough. "You always did have terrible timing." Vance walked past her and stood beside Morrison, resting a hand on the back of the chair. "As you can see, I found him 3 days ago. He's been very reluctant to share information. I'm hoping your presence might encourage him to be more cooperative." Tessa looked at Morrison, then at Vance. "You son of a bitch. I prefer pragmatist, but we can split hairs later." Vance checked his tablet. 39 minutes. I'm going to ask Morrison a question. If he answers, I'll disarm the device. If he doesn't, I'll ask you the same question. If neither of you answer, well, you can imagine what happens next. He turned to Morrison. "Who's been protecting you?" Morrison spat blood onto the floor. "Go to hell!" Vance sighed and pulled out a pistol, pressing it against Morrison's kneecap. "Last chance." "Wait!" Tessa stepped forward. "You want answers? Let him go, and I'll tell you everything." Vance looked at her, amused. "You'll tell me everything anyway. This is just about determining how much pain you're willing to watch first. You're going to kill us both no matter what we say." "Probably. But there are degrees of unpleasantness. Cooperate. And it's quick. Fight me. And it's very, very slow." Morrison looked at Tessa, and in that moment something passed between them, an understanding born from months of working together in situations where trust was the only thing that kept you alive. "Tell him," Morrison said quietly. "Kyle, tell him. It doesn't matter anymore." Tessa's jaw tightened. She looked at Vance. "It's Colonel Garrett's daughter. She's been the one protecting us." Vance went very still. "Garrett's daughter is a civilian analyst with no clearance. She's an intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and she's been investigating you for 6 months." The silence that followed was absolute. Vance's expression shifted from confidence to something colder, more calculating. "You're lying." "I'm not." She approached Morrison right after Garrett died. She knew something was wrong. She knew her father wouldn't have had a heart attack without reason. So she started digging. And what did she find? "Enough to know you're running black market weapons through private military contractors. Enough to know you set up the ambush in Baghdara. Enough to burn your entire operation to the ground." Vance raised the pistol, pointing it at Tessa now. "Where is she?" "I don't know." "Wrong answer. I'm telling you the truth. Morrison knows how to contact her. I don't." Vance turned the gun back toward Morrison. "Is that true?" Morrison smiled through the blood. "Yeah, it's true." "Then you're going to make that contact right now." "Can't. She only reaches out on her schedule. If I try to contact her outside protocol, she'll know something's wrong and she'll disappear." "Then we wait." "You don't have time to wait. That bomb goes off in 37 minutes. And when it does, every federal agency in the country is going to descend on Millerton, including DIA, including Garrett's daughter." Vance's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're bluffing." "Maybe. But are you willing to bet your freedom on it? Tessa watched the calculation happen in Vance's eyes. The weighing of risks, the assessment of outcomes. He was trapped in a situation he'd created, and every option led to exposure. Finally, he lowered the gun. Fine. We'll do this differently. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Disarm the device. Yes. Now. No, I don't care what the timeline was. Do it. He ended the call and looked at Tessa. There. The hospital is safe. Your friend at Riverside will receive the antidote. Everyone walks away happy. Except us. Except you. But at least you saved some lives before the end. That's something. Morrison laughed, a wet, pained sound. You really think this ends here? I think you're both about to have very unfortunate accidents. Tragic, really. Two veterans struggling with PTSD, meeting up in an abandoned warehouse, things getting out of hand. The local police will find your bodies in a few days and chalk it up to a murder-suicide. Except we're both zip-tied. Details can be adjusted. Tessa looked around the warehouse, calculating distances and angles. The two armed men were positioned near the entrance, blocking any escape. Vance had the gun. She and Morrison were both restrained. The odds weren't good, but they weren't impossible. Before you kill us, Tessa said, I need to know something. Why'd you do it? Why sell us out in Baghdara? Vance shrugged. Money. The intelligence community doesn't pay what it used to. Private contracting is where the real compensation happens. Redstone offered me a partnership. All I had to do was provide access and look the other way when certain shipments moved through certain channels. And when we found the cash? When you found the cash, you became a liability. Garrett wanted to report it up the chain. I convinced him to wait, told him we needed to verify the intelligence first. That bought me enough time to set up the ambush. You killed 3 people for money. I facilitated a tactical situation that eliminated a security risk. There's a difference. Not to the people who died. Vance raised the pistol again. And now I'm going to eliminate 2 more. Any last words? Morrison looked at Tessa. It's been real. Yeah. Vance took aim at Morrison's head. And then the warehouse door exploded inward. The blast was deafening, a concussive wave that knocked everyone off balance. Tessa hit the floor hard, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. Through the smoke and debris, she saw figures moving, tactical gear, weapons raised, moving with military precision. Raines's voice cut through the chaos. Federal agents, drop your weapons. The 2 armed men at the entrance tried to react, but they were too slow. Raines's team put them down with controlled bursts, non-lethal shots to center mass that dropped them before they could return fire. Vance scrambled backward, pistol still in hand, looking for cover. But there was nowhere to go. Soldiers were pouring through the shattered door, surrounding him, weapons trained from every angle. On the ground, now! Vance hesitated, the gun trembling in his hand. For a moment, Tessa thought he might try to shoot his way out. But then his shoulders sagged and he dropped the weapon, raising his hands. 2 soldiers moved in, forcing him to his knees and zip-tying his wrists behind his back. Raines crossed the warehouse and knelt beside Tessa, cutting her restraints. You good? How did you find us? Your phone. You left GPS enabled. We tracked you here. The bomb was a fake. We sent a team to the parking structure. There was a device, but it wasn't armed. Vance was bluffing. Tessa stared at him. He said it was armed. He had a timer. He had a video loop, probably recorded earlier and set to play on a timer to make it look live. The actual device was just a shell. No explosives inside. Tessa felt something cold settle in her stomach. Vance had played her. He'd used her fear against her, manipulated her into coming here, into giving up information she should have kept quiet, but he'd also made a mistake. He'd assumed she'd come alone. Raines helped Morrison to his feet, cutting his restraints. Morrison swayed slightly, then steadied himself. I need to make a call. To who? Someone who's been waiting to hear from me. He pulled out a phone. Tessa didn't know where he'd been hiding it, and dialed. The call connected after 2 rings. It's me, Morrison said. Yeah, we got him. Vance is in custody. You can move forward. He listened for a moment, then ended the call and looked at Tessa. Colonel Garrett's daughter sends her regards. She's been building a case against Vance for 6 months. Your information tonight just sealed it. So she's real? Very. And very pissed off about what happened to her father. Rains hauled Vance to his feet. You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, weapons trafficking, and about a dozen other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. Vance looked at Tessa, his expression cold but resigned. This doesn't end with me. Redstone has resources you can't imagine, connections in places you can't reach. You think you've won, but all you've done is make yourself a bigger target. Then they'd better bring more than you did, Tessa said. Rains dragged Vance toward the door. His team followed, securing the two wounded men and clearing the warehouse. Within minutes, the space was empty except for Tessa and Morrison. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling over them. You look like shit, Tessa said finally. Morrison touched his swollen eye and winced. You should see the other guy. I did. Rain shot him. Even better. They walked out of the warehouse together. Outside, the parking lot was full of vehicles, federal response units, tactical teams, medical personnel. The scene was controlled chaos, exactly the kind of operation that happened when someone important got arrested. An ambulance was waiting near the entrance. Paramedics guided Morrison toward it, checking his injuries, asking questions he answered with increasing irritation. Rains approached Tessa, holding out her phone. You've got a message. Came in about 5 minutes ago. Tessa took the phone and opened the message. It was from an unknown number, but the tone was different from Vance's threats. Lieutenant Drain received the antidote. He's stable. Doctors say he'll make a full recovery. You did good tonight. See Garrett. Tessa let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Marcus was going to live. The hospital was secure. Vance was in custody. It should have felt like victory, but all she felt was tired. What now? Morrison asked from the ambulance. Now we figure out who else is involved. Vance didn't run this operation alone. Redstone? And whoever inside the government was providing cover. This goes deeper than one corrupt officer. Rains joined them, his expression grim. We've got a problem. Vance's phone just received a priority message. Looks like it came from someone high up in the Redstone command structure. What does it say? Rains showed her the screen. The message was short and direct. Phase 2 activated. Primary target eliminated. Proceed with cleanup. Tessa's blood went cold. He's not the primary target. He was bait. For what? For everyone who came to stop him. Everyone who's been investigating Redstone. Everyone who knows about Bagdara. Morrison sat up in the ambulance. They're going to hit us all at once. Not just us. Everyone connected to this. Garrett's daughter. The intelligence officers who've been helping her. Anyone who could testify. Rains was already pulling out his radio. All units, lock down perimeter. No one in or out. I need a full security. The explosion came from the east side of the parking lot, a massive fireball that erupted near one of the federal vehicles. The shockwave knocked Tessa off her feet, sending her sprawling across the asphalt. She rolled onto her back, ears ringing, and saw chaos erupting around her. Armed figures were emerging from the shadows beyond the chain-link fence, weapons firing, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness. Rains's team returned fire, but they were caught in the open, exposed and outgunned. Tessa scrambled to her feet and ran toward the warehouse, looking for cover. Morrison was right behind her, moving despite his injuries, his training overriding the pain. They made it inside just as another explosion rocked the parking lot. Through the shattered door, Tessa could see bodies on the ground, soldiers taking cover behind vehicles, bullets tearing through metal and glass. Morrison grabbed a weapon from one of the wounded men Rains's team had taken down earlier. He checked the magazine, chambered around, and took up position near the door. They're not here to arrest anyone, he said. No, they're here to erase us. How many? Too many. Outside, the firefight intensified. Tessa could hear Rains shouting orders, coordinating his team, trying to establish a defensive perimeter. But the attackers had the advantage of surprise and overwhelming force. Tessa's phone buzzed. Another message from C. Garrett. They're coming for me too. If I don't make it, everything I've compiled is in a secure server. Access code BAGDARA_TRUTH. Make sure it gets out. The message included a link and a string of numbers. Tessa memorized both, then deleted the message. If Redstone was targeting everyone connected to this investigation, then Garrett's daughter was in immediate danger. And if she died, the evidence she'd been gathering would die with her. Unless someone else could get to it first. "We need to get out of here," Tessa said. Morrison looked at her like she was insane. "In case you hadn't noticed, we're surrounded." "Then we go through them." "With what? Good intentions and harsh language?" Tessa picked up the other guard's weapon and checked it. Fully loaded. She grabbed 2 spare magazines from his belt and shoved them in her pocket. "You got a better idea?" Morrison smiled despite the blood on his face. "Not really." They moved to the back of the warehouse looking for another exit. There was a service door that led to an alley running behind the building. Tessa cracked it open and looked out. Empty. For now. "We make for the street 2 blocks south. There's a commercial district. More witnesses. Harder for them to operate openly." "And if we don't make it 2 blocks?" "Then we don't." Morrison nodded. "Good enough." They slipped out into the alley and started moving, staying low, using the dumpsters and delivery vehicles for cover. Behind them, the firefight continued, the sound of gunfire echoing through the industrial district. They'd made it halfway down the alley when a figure stepped out from behind a shipping container. Bryn Collier, the charge nurse from Blackridge, stood blocking their path. She had a gun in her hand and an expression that said she was done playing subtle. "I told them you'd run," she said. "I told them you'd never just surrender, but they didn't listen." Tessa raised her weapon. "Get out of the way." "Can't do that. I've got orders." "From who? Vance is in custody. Your operation's blown." "Vance was middle management. The people I work for don't get caught." "Redstone." "Among others." Morrison moved slightly to the left, trying to flank her, but Bryn tracked him with the gun. "Don't. I'm a better shot than you think." "Why?" Tessa asked. "Why work for them?" "Because the government doesn't take care of its own. I did 15 years as a combat medic. Got out with a bad back and a pension that barely covers rent. Redstone offered me real money to do what I already knew how to do. I'd have been stupid to say no. You helped them plant bombs in a hospital. I helped them eliminate threats to national security. There's a difference. Not to the people you were willing to kill." Bryn's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. But orders are orders." The shot rang out, sharp and final in the narrow alley. But it wasn't Bryn who fired. She stumbled forward, a red stain spreading across the back of her shirt. She dropped to her knees, the gun clattering from her hand, and pitched forward onto the asphalt. Behind her, standing at the far end of the alley with a rifle still raised, was a woman in her late 20s with dark hair and her father's eyes. Catherine Garrett lowered the weapon and walked toward them. "You must be Hale and Morrison." Tessa stared at her. "You're supposed to be in hiding." "I was. Then I got word that Redstone activated their cleanup protocol. Figured you could use some help." "Your father would have done the same thing. Now come on, we don't have much time." They followed her out of the alley and onto a side street where a nondescript sedan was waiting. Catherine slid into the driver's seat. Tessa took the passenger side and Morrison climbed in back. Catherine pulled away from the curb, driving fast but not recklessly, navigating through the industrial district toward the main roads. "Where are we going?" Tessa asked. "Somewhere safe, or at least safer than here. Redstone's going to come after you." "They've been coming after me for 6 months. I'm still here." "Your father died because he trusted the wrong people. I'm not making that mistake." She glanced at Tessa. "You did good tonight. Vance's arrest is going to open doors. People are going to start asking questions he can't answer, and when they do, everything I've compiled is going to come flooding out. Unless Redstone kills everyone who knows about it first. That's why we need to move fast. I've got contacts in the Inspector General's office. People who can't be bought. We get the evidence to them, and this whole thing comes apart." Morrison leaned forward from the back seat. "And what about us? We're targets now. Everyone who helped bring down Vance is marked. Then we go public. Tell the story. Force Redstone to operate in the light where everyone can see them." "That's suicide." "No. Staying quiet is suicide. Going public is the only way we survive." They drove in silence for a moment, the city lights of Millerton giving way to darker suburbs. Tessa looked out the window, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The bombs, the firefight, the revelations. She'd spent 11 months trying to disappear, and in one night, She'd been dragged back into the exact fight she'd been trying to avoid. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some fights you couldn't avoid. Maybe some things were worth the risk. Her phone buzzed. A message from Rains secured the perimeter. Attackers retreated. 8 casualties on our side. Vance is secure. Where are you? Tessa typed back quickly. With Morrison and C. Garrett. We're going to finish this. She sent the message and looked at Catherine. How far to your safe location? 20 minutes. Maybe less if traffic cooperates. And once we're there, we compile everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence my father gathered before he died. And then we send it to every news outlet, every congressional oversight committee, and every inspector general's office in the country. Redstone will retaliate. Let them try. Once this goes public, they'll be too busy defending themselves to come after us. Tessa wanted to believe that, but she'd seen what Redstone was capable of. They didn't operate like normal criminals. They operated like a government within a government, with resources and connections that made them almost untouchable. Almost. They were 10 minutes from Catherine's safe house when Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then his expression went pale. Say that again. He listened, then ended the call and looked at Tessa. That was my contact at DIA. Redstone just filed an emergency injunction claiming everything related to Baghdara is classified under national security grounds. They're arguing that any disclosure would compromise ongoing intelligence operations. Can they do that? If they have someone high enough up signing off on it, yeah. They can bury this for years. Catherine's jaw tightened. Then we need to move faster. She accelerated, weaving through traffic, pushing the sedan to its limits. They were 5 minutes from the safe house when Tessa's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer. Staff Sergeant Hale. The voice on the other end was cultured, professional, and utterly cold. My name is Director Kincaid. I'm the Executive Oversight Officer for Redstone Global. I think we need to talk. I've got nothing to say to you. Then listen. You've caused significant disruption to operations that are vital to national security. Major Vance was a valuable asset, and his arrest has created complications that will take months to resolve. Good. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to make you an offer. Drop this investigation. Walk away. And I'll ensure that you and everyone involved receives compensation for your trouble. Substantial compensation. That you think you can buy me off? I think you're a pragmatist who understands that some fights can't be won. Redstone has resources you can't match and connections you can't break. We own people at every level of government. Judges, senators, intelligence directors. You go public with whatever you think you have, and we'll bury it so deep it'll never see daylight. Then why are you calling? Because burying evidence takes time and effort, and I'd prefer to resolve this quietly. So here's the offer one more time. Take the money, disappear. Live whatever life you want, far away from all of this. And if I say no, then you and everyone you care about will be dead by morning. The line went dead. Tessa lowered the phone, her hand steady despite the rage burning in her chest. Catherine looked at her. What did they say? They offered me money to walk away. And? I told them no. Catherine smiled grimly. Good, because we're here. She pulled into the driveway of a small house on a quiet residential street. The kind of place nobody would look twice at. The kind of place where you could hide in plain sight. They got out of the car and headed for the front door. Catherine unlocked it and led them inside, flipping on lights as they moved through a living room that looked like it belonged to a graduate student. Books everywhere, a laptop on the coffee table, notes pinned to a corkboard on the wall. The server's in the basement, Catherine said. Everything my father compiled is on there. Financial records, communications, operational reports. Enough to prove Redstone's been running illegal weapons through at least 6 countries. How long to copy it? 10 minutes. Maybe less. They headed for the basement stairs. And that's when the windows exploded inward, glass and smoke filling the room as tactical teams poured through every entrance at once. Tessa hit the floor as the first flashbang went off, the concussive blast turning the world into white noise and blinding light. She rolled toward the kitchen, feeling rather than seeing Morrison do the same. Catherine was somewhere behind her, moving through muscle memory and training that didn't come from being an analyst. The tactical team came through fast, Boots on hardwood, weapons sweeping corners, voices shouting commands that overlapped into chaos. But they weren't federal. No badges announced, no legal authority declared, just breach and clear, the kind of entry that said whoever was coming through that door didn't care about warrants or witnesses. Tessa's vision cleared enough to see 3 figures silhouetted in the smoke-filled living room. She grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy ceramic lamp, and hurled it at the closest one. It caught him in the shoulder, throwing off his aim just long enough for Morrison to tackle him from the side. They went down hard, Morrison driving his elbow into the man's throat before ripping the weapon free. He fired twice, controlled bursts that dropped another figure coming through the shattered window. Catherine had already made it to the basement door. "Move!" Tessa scrambled after her, Morrison covering their retreat with suppressing fire. They hit the stairs as bullets chewed through the doorframe above their heads, splinters and drywall dust raining down. The basement was unfinished concrete and exposed beams, lit by a single hanging bulb. A server rack sat in the corner, lights blinking steadily, oblivious to the chaos above. Catherine was already at the keyboard, fingers flying. "How long?" Tessa shouted over the gunfire. 2 minutes to dump everything to a remote backup. We don't have 2 minutes. Then buy me some time. Morrison took up position at the base of the stairs, weapon trained on the door above. Tessa moved to the small window wells that opened at ground level, checking for secondary entry points. Through the grimy glass, she could see boots moving around the perimeter. They were surrounded. Again. The door at the top of the stairs splintered as someone kicked it. Morrison fired through the opening, forcing them back. But it was a temporary reprieve. The next attempt would be coordinated. Flashbangs followed by overwhelming force. Tessa's mind raced through options. The server was their only leverage. Without it, everything Catherine's father had gathered would disappear into classified vaults and bureaucratic black holes. But if they stayed here, they'd be dead before the upload finished. "Catherine, can you access that server remotely?" "If I'm connected to the internet, yeah." "Then disconnect it. We're taking it with us. It weighs 40 pounds and we're surrounded by people with guns." "I'm open to better suggestions." Catherine didn't have any. She yanked cables free, killed the power, and started unbolting the server from its rack. Morrison fired another burst up the stairs, then swore as his magazine ran dry. "I'm out." Tessa tossed him her weapon. "Make it count." She helped Catherine wrench the server free. It was heavier than 40 pounds, all metal housing and dense electronics. They carried it between them toward the window wells. "You can't be serious," Morrison said. "You got a better exit strategy?" "Literally anything else." Tessa ignored him. She grabbed a toolbox sitting on a nearby workbench and hurled it through the window well. Glass shattered outward. She knocked out the remaining shards with the heel of her boot, then started pushing the server through the opening. It barely fit. Metal scraped against concrete, the sharp sound lost under the resumed gunfire. Catherine climbed through first, dragging the server with her. Tessa followed, her shoulders barely clearing the frame. They emerged in the narrow space between the house and the neighbor's fence, overgrown with weeds and littered with forgotten trash. Morrison came through last, firing a final shot up the stairs before diving through the window. The tactical team would realize what happened in seconds, maybe less. They hauled the server through the weeds, Catherine leading them toward the back fence. She kicked at a loose board until it gave way, creating a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. They emerged in the neighbor's backyard, a well-maintained space with a garden and a patio that looked like it belonged to someone who cared about curb appeal. Lights were on inside the house. Tessa could see someone moving past the kitchen window. "We can't go through there," Morrison said. "We're not." Catherine pointed toward the side gate. "Street access." They made it to the gate just as the first tactical operator came around the front of the house. He shouted something and raised his weapon. Tessa and Morrison moved simultaneously, Tessa going low, Morrison covering high. The operator got one shot off before Morrison put him down with 2 to the chest. The gunfire would bring the rest of them. 30 seconds. Maybe less. They hit the street and ran, the server awkward and heavy between Catherine and Tessa. Morrison covered their rear, moving backward, weapon tracking for threats. A black SUV rounded the corner 2 blocks down, accelerating hard. Morrison fired at the windshield, spiderwebbing the glass but not stopping the vehicle. "Down!" Tessa shoved Catherine behind a parked car as the SUV roared past, muzzle flashes erupting from the passenger window. Bullets punched through metal and shattered glass, the street erupting into chaos. The SUV skidded to a stop 30 yards ahead, doors opening, more operators spilling out. They were trapped between two forces with nowhere to go. And then a different vehicle came screaming around the opposite corner, a civilian sedan moving way too fast, engine roaring. It swerved hard, clipping the rear of the SUV and sending it spinning. The sedan kept coming, tires smoking as it slammed to a stop directly in front of them. The driver's door flew open and Rains leaned out. "Get in!" They didn't argue. Catherine and Tessa threw the server in the trunk while Morrison piled into the back seat. Tessa slid into the passenger side just as Rains floored it, the sedan fishtailing before finding traction. Behind them, the tactical teams were regrouping, more vehicles appearing from side streets. Rains wove through residential roads, ignoring stop signs, pushing the sedan to its limits. "How'd you find us?" Tessa shouted over the engine noise. "Tracked Catherine's phone. Lucky I did." He glanced in the rearview mirror. "We've got company." Two SUVs were gaining, black and unmarked, moving with professional precision. Rains took a hard right, tires screaming, then accelerated down a straightaway. "I can't outrun them in this." "Then we don't run. We end this." "How?" Tessa pulled out her phone and opened the link Catherine had sent her earlier. The secure server login appeared. She entered the access code, BAGDARA_TRUTH. The screen filled with files, hundreds of them. Financial records, communications, operational reports, everything Colonel Garrett had gathered before he died. And at the top, a video file labeled Insurance. Tessa clicked it. The video opened on Colonel Garrett sitting in what looked like his home office. He looked tired, older than Tessa remembered, but his eyes were sharp. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. And if you're Tessa Hale or Kyle Morrison, then you need to know what really happened in Baghdara." Tessa's breath caught. Beside her, Rains glanced at the screen, then back at the road. Garrett continued. "The weapons cache your team found wasn't insurgent supply. It was a CIA operation, specifically a joint task force run by the National Clandestine Service. They were arming local militias to destabilize regional governments. When your team stumbled onto it, they had two choices: bring you into the fold or eliminate the witnesses." He paused, his expression grim. Major Vance was their inside man. He'd been on Redstone's payroll for 3 years, facilitating arms transfers and providing operational security. When I started asking questions after the ambush, he tried to convince me it was all insurgent activity. But I knew better. I'd seen the equipment manifest. I knew what we were really looking at. Garrett leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I compiled everything I could find: bank transfers, communications, shipping manifests, all of it proving that Redstone was operating as a front for unauthorized intelligence operations. And when I took it to the Inspector General, I was told to drop it, told it was above my clearance, told there would be consequences if I continued." He smiled, bitter and tired. "So I made this video, and I hid copies of everything where they couldn't find it. If you're watching this, it means they got to me, but it also means you have everything you need to expose them." The video ended. Tessa stared at the screen, processing what she'd just heard. The CIA. Not just Redstone, not just Vance, an entire apparatus of clandestine operations using private contractors to do the government's dirty work. "We need to go public with this," Morrison said from the back seat. "Right now, before they can bury it." "We can't just email this to a reporter," Catherine said. "Redstone has people everywhere. They'll intercept it, claim it's fabricated, tie it up in legal injunctions until everyone forgets it exists." "So what do we do?" Tessa looked at Rains. "How far are we from the federal courthouse?" 20 minutes. Why?" "Because there's a grand jury convening tomorrow morning on federal corruption charges. Completely unrelated case. But if we get this evidence into that proceeding, it becomes part of the official record. They can't bury it. They can't classify it. It's public testimony." Rains shook his head. "You'd need a federal prosecutor to introduce it. And even if you found one willing to do it, Redstone would have them removed before they could file the paperwork." "Not if we have something they want more." "Like what?" "Vance. He's in custody. If we can get him to flip to testify about Redstone's operations, the prosecutor's office won't have a choice. They'll have to bring it to the grand jury. Vance will never flip. He's too deep. Everyone flips when the alternative is life in federal prison. We just need to give him a reason to believe we can protect him. Morrison leaned forward. And can we? No, but he doesn't need to know that. Raines considered this, then nodded slowly. It might work, but we'd need access to Vance, and right now he's being held in a federal facility with security protocols we can't breach. We don't breach it. We get invited in. By who? Tessa pulled up her contacts and found the number she'd been given months ago. The one she'd been told to only use in absolute emergencies. Inspector General's office. Direct line. She hit dial. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. This is Inspector General Reeves. Sir, this is former Staff Sergeant Tessa Hale. I have evidence of federal corruption involving the CIA and private military contractors. I need immediate protection and access to a federal prosecutor. Silence. Then, what kind of evidence? Video testimony from Colonel Marcus Garrett, financial records, communications, everything proving that Redstone Global has been running unauthorized weapons operations with CIA oversight. Another pause, longer this time. Where are you right now? In transit, being pursued by Redstone operatives. Give me your location. I'll have federal marshals meet you. Tessa gave him their approximate coordinates. Reeves listened, then spoke quietly to someone else in the background. Marshals are en route. ETA 8 minutes. Stay on the line. Raines took the next turn toward the designated rendezvous point, a public parking structure near the courthouse. Behind them, the SUVs were still following, maintaining distance but not engaging. They're waiting, Morrison said. They know where we're going. They're going to hit us before the marshals arrive. Let them try. They pulled into the parking structure, tires echoing off concrete as they spiraled up toward the third level where they'd have multiple exit routes. Raines parked near the center, positioning the sedan for quick escape if needed. The SUVs entered the structure moments later, moving slowly, methodically clearing each level. Tessa got out of the car, phone still pressed to her ear. Inspector General, we have hostiles in the parking structure. If your people don't get here soon, this evidence disappears with us. 2 minutes. Hold position. Morrison and Raines flanked the sedan, weapons ready. Catherine stayed behind cover, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The first SUV emerged onto the third level, moving toward them with predatory patience. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but Tessa counted at least 4 figures. The vehicle stopped 20 yards away. The doors opened. Director Kincaid stepped out, the man whose voice Tessa had heard on the phone earlier. He was tall, mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she'd made in a year. 2 armed operators flanked him. Staff Sergeant Hale, he said, his voice calm and professional. This has gone far enough. I agree. Then you'll hand over the server and whatever copies you've made. Do that, and everyone walks away from this. Except the people you've already killed. They don't get to walk away. Kincaid's expression didn't change. Collateral damage in operations you can't possibly understand. Your team stumbled into something beyond your clearance. That's not our fault. You murdered 3 members of my unit to cover up illegal arms trafficking. We eliminated security risks. There's a difference. Not to me. Kincaid sighed, like a disappointed teacher dealing with a stubborn student. I'm trying to be reasonable here, but if you force my hand, I will resolve this with maximum prejudice. That means everyone in this parking structure dies, including you, including Colonel Garrett's daughter. Everyone. You're threatening to commit mass murder in a federal parking structure. I'm resolving a national security issue, different terminology, same result. The sound of sirens cut through the tension, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Kincaid's jaw tightened. He looked at his operators, then back at Tessa. Last chance. I think I'll take my odds with federal protection. Then you're a fool. Kincaid nodded to his operators. They raised their weapons. And that's when 3 black vans screeched onto the parking level, doors flying open, U.S. Marshals pouring out in full tactical gear. Federal agents, drop your weapons, now! Kincaid's operators hesitated, caught between following orders and facing down overwhelming force. The hesitation cost them. Marshals swarmed their position, disarming them in seconds, forcing them to the ground. Kincaid himself didn't resist. He simply stood there, hands at his sides, watching as his operation collapsed around him. A marshal approached Tessa, weapon lowered. "Ma'am, are you Tessa Hale?" "I am." "Inspector General Reeves sent us. You're under federal protection effective immediately." "What about him?" She gestured toward Kincaid. "He's under arrest. Conspiracy, attempted murder, obstruction of justice. The list is going to get a lot longer once we process the evidence you've provided." Tessa felt something release in her chest. Not relief exactly, but the absence of pressure that had been building for 11 months. It wasn't over. Not yet. But they'd survived the immediate threat. Rains approached, his expression a mix of exhaustion and vindication. "You actually pulled it off." "We pulled it off. What now?" "Now we make sure this sticks. Vance, Kincaid, Redstone. The whole operation gets dragged into the light where everyone can see it." One of the marshals handed Tessa a tablet. "Inspector General wants to speak with you directly." She took the tablet. Reeves's face appeared on screen, his expression serious but not hostile. "Staff Sergeant Hale, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence you provided. If even half of it is legitimate, this is going to be the biggest intelligence scandal in 2 decades. It's all legitimate. Colonel Garrett made sure of that. Then we have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm assigning a federal prosecutor to your case. You'll be giving testimony to a grand jury within 48 hours. Everything you know, everything Garrett compiled, all of it goes on record. What about protection? Redstone's going to come after everyone involved. You'll have around-the-clock federal protection until the trial concludes. Anyone who attempts retaliation will face additional charges. This office doesn't take threats against witnesses lightly." Tessa nodded. "There's one more thing. Major Vance. He's the key to connecting Redstone to the CIA. We need him to testify." Vance is refusing to cooperate. He'll cooperate when he understands the alternative. Life in federal prison versus witness protection and a reduced sentence. It's not a hard choice. Reeves considered this. "I'll arrange a meeting, but if he doesn't flip, we proceed without him. This case doesn't depend on his cooperation." "Understood." The call ended. Tessa handed the tablet back to the marshal and looked around the parking structure. Kincaid and his operators were being loaded into transport vehicles. The server, Colonel Garrett's evidence, was being secured by federal agents. Catherine stood nearby, looking shell-shocked but alive. Morrison approached, his injuries from earlier starting to show now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "You think this is really it? That we're actually safe?" "Safe is relative, but yeah, I think the worst is over. And Redstone, the CIA, all the people who benefited from keeping this quiet, they're about to have a very public reckoning." The marshals escorted them to separate vehicles for transport to a secure federal facility. As Tessa climbed into the back seat, she caught sight of Kincaid being loaded into a different van. Their eyes met for a brief moment. He didn't look angry, just resigned, like he'd always known this was how it would end. The van pulled away, leaving the parking structure behind. Through the window, Tessa watched the city lights blur past, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 11 months of hiding, one night of chaos, and now, finally, a chance at justice. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for not letting my father die for nothing. C. Garrett." Tessa typed a quick response. "He'd be proud of you." She sent it and leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes. They'd won, or at least they'd survived long enough to fight another day. The secure facility turned out to be a federal courthouse annex with reinforced security and accommodations for protected witnesses. Tessa was given a room on the 3rd floor, small but functional, with a bed, desk, and a window that overlooked the city. Rains appeared in her doorway an hour later, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this." She took one gratefully. "You didn't have to stay." "Yeah, I did. This is my case too now. Vance was my caller. I want to see it through." "Any word on when we meet with him?" "Tomorrow morning. The prosecutor wants you there when they make the pitch. Apparently your presence might encourage cooperation." "Because I'm the one he tried to kill." "Something like that." They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewed hours ago. "You know this is going to get ugly. Raines said finally. Once the story goes public, once the media gets hold of it, there's going to be investigations, congressional hearings, careers destroyed. Good. Some of those careers belong to people who thought they were doing the right thing, people who believed the intelligence operations were necessary. That doesn't make them right, and it doesn't excuse what they did. Raines nodded. Just wanted to make sure you were ready for it. The blowback, the scrutiny. You're going to become very visible very quickly. Tessa had already thought about that. She'd spent 11 months invisible, and now she was about to become the most visible person in the intelligence community. Every decision she'd made, every action she'd taken would be examined and questioned. But that was the price of justice. And after everything she'd lost, everything she'd survived, it felt like a price worth paying. I'm ready, she said. Raines stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth? You did good. Better than good. You took down an operation that should have been impossible to touch. I had help. Yeah, but you started it. That counts for something. He left, and Tessa was alone with her thoughts again. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping on a name she hadn't called in over a year. Her sister. Living in Portland, teaching middle school, completely disconnected from the world of intelligence and military operations. Tessa had cut contact when she went into hiding, told herself it was for her sister's protection, but really, it was because she'd been ashamed of running, ashamed of surviving when others hadn't. She hit dial before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Hey, it's me. Silence. Then, Tessa? Oh my God, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for months. I know, I'm sorry, it's complicated. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm safe, and I'm going to explain everything, but not over the phone. Can I come see you, maybe next week? Of course. Yes, absolutely. Just please tell me you're really okay. I am, or I will be. Soon. They talked for another 10 minutes, carefully avoiding specifics, just reconnecting after too long apart. When the call ended, Tessa felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She slept better that night than she had in almost a year. No nightmares, no waking up in a cold sweat, just deep, dreamless rest. The meeting with Vance was scheduled for 9 the next morning in a secured interview room. Tessa arrived early, flanked by marshals, and was led through multiple security checkpoints before reaching the room. Vance was already there, sitting at a metal table, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked worse than when Tessa had last seen him, unshaven, tired, the polish stripped away to reveal something more human underneath. The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Vasquez, sat across from him. She looked up when Tessa entered, then gestured to the empty chair beside her. Staff Sergeant Hale, thank you for coming. Tessa sat down, her eyes locked on Vance. He stared back, his expression unreadable. Vasquez opened a folder in front of her. Major Vance, you've been read your rights. You understand that anything you say can and will be used against you. I understand. Good, because I'm about to make you an offer. And before you refuse it, I want you to fully understand what you're facing. She pulled out a sheet of paper and slid it across the table. This is the preliminary charge sheet: conspiracy to commit murder, weapons trafficking, obstruction of justice, treason. The treason charge alone carries a maximum penalty of death. Vance didn't look at the paper. I'm aware of the charges. Then you're also aware that the evidence against you is overwhelming. We have Colonel Garrett's testimony. We have financial records. We have communications. We have witnesses. You're not walking away from this. So why are we having this conversation? Because the people you work for are going to throw you to the wolves. Redstone, the CIA, all of them. They're going to claim you were a rogue operator acting without authorization. They're going to bury you so deep that nobody even remembers your name. Unless I cooperate. Unless you cooperate. You testify against Redstone. You provide names, dates, operations, everything you know about the illegal arms trafficking. And in exchange, we offer you a deal. 20 years in federal prison instead of life. Witness protection after you serve your sentence. Vance leaned back in his chair. 20 years is a long time. It's better than death. Maybe. He looked at Tessa. What do you think, Staff Sergeant? Think I should take the deal? I think you should rot in prison for what you did. But if your testimony brings down the people who ordered the hit on my team, then yeah, take the deal. Vance smiled, cold and bitter. You always were pragmatic. That's what I liked about you. I don't care what you liked about me. I care about justice. Justice. He said the word like it tasted bad. You really believe that's what this is? Justice? More than you'll ever get otherwise. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the charge sheet. Then he looked at Vasquez. I want full immunity for any testimony I provide. Not happening. 20 years is the offer. Then we don't have a deal. Vasquez started gathering her papers. Then enjoy your trial and the rest of your very short life in federal supermax. She stood to leave. Tessa followed. They were almost at the door when Vance spoke again. Wait. Vasquez turned back. Vance's shoulders sagged. 15 years, and witness protection starts immediately after sentencing. 20 years. Non-negotiable. Then throw in protective custody during the trial. Redstone's going to come after me the second they realize I'm cooperating. Vasquez considered this, then nodded. Done. But the testimony starts today, right now. Everything you know. Vance looked at Tessa one last time. You sure you want to hear this? Once I start talking, you're going to learn things about people you trusted. Things that are going to make you question everything. I stopped trusting people a long time ago. Fair enough. He turned back to Vasquez. Get me a recorder. This is going to take a while. Tessa stayed for the first hour of testimony, listening as Vance detailed the operations he'd been part of. The arms shipments, the bribed officials, the CIA handlers who'd authorized everything. Names kept coming. Some Tessa recognized, some she didn't. But each one was another brick in the case Vasquez was building. When she finally left the room, Raines was waiting in the hallway. How'd it go? He flipped. Vasquez is getting everything on record. Think it'll be enough? It'll be enough to start. The rest will come once people start seeing consequences. Once they realize protecting Redstone isn't worth their careers. They walked together toward the exit, passing marshals and federal agents who nodded respectfully as they went by. Tessa wasn't invisible anymore. She was a witness, a survivor, someone who'd stood up when others had looked away. Outside, the morning sun was bright and cold, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. Tessa stood there for a moment, breathing in air that felt cleaner somehow. Morrison appeared from a waiting vehicle, Catherine beside him. They both looked exhausted, but alive. It's done, Tessa said. For now, Morrison replied. Trial's still months away. A lot can happen between now and then. Let it. We've got federal protection and evidence that can't be buried. They come after us. They prove everything we've been saying. Catherine looked at the courthouse behind them. My father spent his whole career trying to do the right thing, trying to protect people. I'm glad it wasn't for nothing. It wasn't. He made sure of that. They stood together in silence. 4 people who'd survived something that should have killed them. 4 people who'd refused to stay quiet when silence would have been easier. Tessa's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Her stomach dropped when she opened it. Congratulations on your victory. It won't last. Redstone. She showed the message to Raines. His expression darkened. They're not done. No, but neither are we. Tessa deleted the message and pocketed her phone. Let them come. Let them try. She'd spent 11 months running, and she was done with that. Whatever Redstone sent next, she'd be ready. And this time, she wouldn't be alone. The trial began 6 weeks later in a federal courthouse that had been transformed into a fortress. Barricades lined the streets. Metal detectors guarded every entrance. Snipers positioned on rooftops scanned the crowds that gathered each morning. Reporters, protesters, curious civilians drawn to what the media was calling the biggest intelligence scandal in a generation. Tessa sat in the witness room on the morning of her testimony, watching the chaos unfold through a window that was probably bulletproof. Catherine sat beside her, silent and tense. Morrison paced near the door, unable to stay still. You ready? Raines asked from the doorway. Tessa looked at him. As much as I'll ever be. Vasquez says the defense is going to try to discredit you, paint you as unstable. a veteran with PTSD who invented a conspiracy to explain away her own failures. Let them try. They're going to bring up why you left the service, why you spent 11 months working a job you were overqualified for. They're going to make it seem like you were hiding from something. I was hiding from something. I was hiding from them. Raines nodded. Just stick to the facts. Answer the questions. Don't let them bait you into saying something you'll regret. I won't. But she knew it wouldn't be that simple. The defense attorneys representing Redstone Global were some of the best money could buy. They'd already filed dozens of motions trying to suppress evidence, disqualify witnesses, delay proceedings. They'd lost every motion, but that hadn't stopped them from fighting. Because they knew what everyone in that courtroom knew. If this trial went the wrong way, it would expose operations that went far beyond Redstone. It would implicate government officials, intelligence officers, contractors who'd spent decades operating in the shadows. The stakes weren't just criminal penalties, they were existential. A marshal appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you, Staff Sergeant." Tessa stood, smoothing down the simple blazer she'd been given for court appearances. Nothing flashy, nothing that would distract from the testimony, just professional and credible. She walked into the courtroom and felt the weight of every eye turned toward her. The gallery was packed, journalists, federal observers, family members of the victims. At the prosecution table, Elena Vasquez looked up and gave a slight nod of encouragement. At the defense table sat 3 attorneys in expensive suits, and behind them, in the gallery, representatives from Redstone Global who watched with expressions that gave nothing away. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Carmichael, who'd spent 30 years on the federal bench, gestured toward the witness stand. "Please be seated, Staff Sergeant Hale." Tessa took the oath and sat down, her hands folded in her lap, her posture straight. She'd testified before, but never like this. Never with this much writing on every word. Vasquez approached, her expression calm and professional. "Staff Sergeant Hale, can you tell the court about your service record?" "I served 8 years in the Army, explosive ordnance disposal, deployed 3 times, received commendations for valor and technical proficiency." "And why did you leave the service?" "Because 3 members of my unit were killed in an ambush that shouldn't have happened, and I believe someone on the inside had set us up." The defense attorney stood immediately. "Objection, speculation." Judge Carmichael looked at Tessa. "Do you have evidence to support that belief?" "Yes, Your Honor. The evidence that's been submitted to this court. Communications between Major Vance and Redstone operatives. Financial records showing payments. All of it proving that our mission was compromised before we ever set foot in Baghdara." The judge nodded. "Overruled. Continue." Vasquez walked Tessa through the events of that night at Black Ridge Trauma Center. The tampered vent. The military dog that had alerted. The device she'd identified before anyone else understood the threat. Every detail was documented, backed by security footage, corroborated by witness testimony. When Vasquez finished, the lead defense attorney, a man named Harrington with silver hair and a voice like honey, stood to cross-examine. "Staff Sergeant Hale, you claim you identified an explosive device in Lieutenant Drain's hospital room, but according to your own testimony, you'd been out of active duty for 11 months. How is it possible you recognize something that trained EOD technicians would have needed specialized equipment to detect?" "Because I know what to look for. Training doesn't disappear just because you change jobs." "But you weren't working as an EOD tech anymore, were you? You were working as a nurse, a significant step down from your previous position." "I was working a job that allowed me to stay off the radar." "Off the radar from who?" "From the people trying to kill me." Harrington smiled like he'd been waiting for that answer. "And who exactly was trying to kill you?" "Redstone Global, under orders from Major Vance and his handlers." "Handlers? You mean government officials?" "Yes." "Can you name these officials?" Vasquez stood. "Your Honor, the witness has already provided a list of names in sealed testimony. Defense counsel has access to that information." Harrington nodded. "Yes, I've seen the list, and I find it interesting that Staff Sergeant Hale is accusing multiple high-ranking intelligence officers of conspiracy without any direct evidence linking them to the alleged crimes." "The evidence is in Colonel Garrett's files," Tessa said. "Everything he compiled before he was killed. Before he died of a heart attack, you mean? A natural death that you're now claiming was murder." A convenient death that happened right after he started asking the wrong questions. Convenient for your narrative, perhaps, but the medical examiner's report shows no signs of foul play, no toxins, no trauma, just a man in his 60s with a history of heart disease who suffered a fatal cardiac event. Tessa kept her voice steady. I'm not a medical examiner. I can't prove how Colonel Garrett died, but I can prove that the people he was investigating had motive to silence him. Motive isn't evidence, Staff Sergeant. It's speculation. Then explain the devices planted at Black Ridge. Explain the tactical team that attacked a federal safe house. Explain why Redstone sent armed operatives to kill witnesses before they could testify. Harrington's expression didn't change. I don't have to explain anything. The burden of proof is on the prosecution, and what they've presented is a collection of circumstantial evidence held together by the testimony of witnesses who have every reason to lie. I'm not lying. Aren't you? You disappeared for 11 months, cut off contact with everyone you knew, worked a job you were overqualified for. Classic signs of paranoia and mental instability. How do we know you didn't fabricate this entire conspiracy to justify your own failures? Tessa felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. Because I'm not the only witness. Captain Rains will testify. Sergeant Morrison will testify. Catherine Garrett will testify. We're not all fabricating the same story. Or you're all part of a coordinated effort to bring down an organization that exposed operational failures you'd rather keep hidden. Vasquez stood again. Your Honor, defense counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Carmichael nodded. Sustained. Mr. Harrington, move on. Harrington studied Tessa for a long moment, then returned to his table. No further questions. Tessa stepped down from the witness stand, her legs shaking slightly, but her expression controlled. She'd done what she came to do. The rest was up to the jury. Over the next 3 weeks, the prosecution presented a case that was methodical and devastating. Rains testified about the devices found at Black Ridge, the tactical teams that had attacked federal personnel, the evidence seized from Redstone operatives. Morrison described the torture he'd endured, the questions they'd asked, the operations they'd wanted to keep buried. Catherine presented her father's files, thousands of documents proving financial connections between Redstone and government officials. Bank transfers. Encrypted communications. Operational reports that showed Redstone had been running unauthorized weapons shipments for years. And then Vance took the stand. He looked smaller than Tessa remembered, diminished by weeks in federal custody. But when he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. Vasquez led him through his testimony with surgical precision, every operation he'd overseen, every payment he'd authorized, every order he'd given that had resulted in deaths. Why did you do it? Vasquez asked. Vance looked at the jury. Because I was told it was necessary, that the operations we were running were vital to national security, that the ends justified the means. And do you still believe that? No. I believe I was used. That people higher up the chain saw an opportunity to profit from illegal activity and convinced themselves it was patriotic. The defense attorneys attacked him during cross-examination, trying to paint him as a liar, trying to reduce his sentence. But the evidence backed up everything he said. The jury could see it. The judge could see it. Even Redstone's attorneys could see it, though they'd never admit it. The trial lasted 8 weeks total. By the end, the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Media coverage was relentless. Cable news ran segments analyzing every day's testimony. Former intelligence officers appeared on talk shows defending or condemning the operations. Congressional committees announced investigations. When the jury finally deliberated, it took them less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Tessa sat in the gallery as the foreman stood to read the decision. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy. Murder. Weapons trafficking. Every charge stuck. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Vance received 20 years as agreed. Kincaid and the other Redstone executives received life without parole. Lesser operatives received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. But the real reckoning came in the aftermath. Within a month, 3 high-ranking CIA officials resigned under pressure. The director of the National Clandestine Service was fired and faced federal charges. Congressional hearings were announced to investigate how such extensive illegal operations had been allowed to continue for so long. Redstone Global was dissolved, its assets seized, its remaining personnel scattered. The private military contractor that had operated with impunity for decades simply ceased to exist. And slowly, the truth spread beyond courtrooms and congressional chambers. News outlets ran features on the victims: the 3 soldiers killed in Baghdara, the others who'd died trying to expose the conspiracy. Their families finally had answers, finally had justice. Tessa stood in Arlington National Cemetery on a cold morning in November, watching as 3 headstones were unveiled. Her team, the people who'd trusted her, worked beside her, died because someone decided they knew too much. Their families were there: parents, siblings, children who'd grown up without them. Morrison stood beside Tessa, his arm in a sling from injuries that still hadn't fully healed. Catherine was there too, along with Rains and a contingent of soldiers who'd served with the fallen. A general gave a speech about sacrifice and honor, about how these soldiers had died protecting their country, even when their country had failed to protect them. Tessa barely heard it. She was thinking about the last mission they'd run together, the school in Baghdara, the weapons cache they'd found, the moment everything had changed. After the ceremony, one of the family members approached her, a woman in her 50s with red-rimmed eyes and a grief that looked like it would never fully heal. "You're Staff Sergeant Hale," the woman said. "I am. My son was on your team, Specialist David Torres." Tessa remembered him. 23 years old, quick with a joke, careful with his hands. He'd wanted to go to engineering school after his service ended. "He was a good soldier," Tessa said quietly. "One of the best." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for not letting them bury what happened, for making sure people knew he didn't die for nothing." "He didn't. None of them did." The woman squeezed Tessa's hand, then walked back to her family. Morrison moved closer, his voice low. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." They left the cemetery together, walking through rows of white headstones that stretched toward the horizon. So many people who'd served, so many who'd sacrificed. Tessa's phone buzzed as they reached the parking lot. A message from Inspector General Reeves. "The Attorney General wants to meet with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. It's important." She showed the message to Morrison. He raised an eyebrow. "Think it's more testimony?" "I don't know. Only one way to find out." The Attorney General's office was everything Tessa expected: polished wood, leather chairs, certificates, and awards covering the walls. The AG herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years as a prosecutor before being appointed to her current position. "Staff Sergeant Hale," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming." Tessa sat, wary. "What's this about?" "About what comes next. You've done something remarkable. You've exposed corruption that most people wouldn't have dared to challenge. You've brought justice to victims who deserved it, and in doing so, you've demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity we need." "Need for what?" The AG leaned forward. "The intelligence community is broken. The Redstone scandal proved that. We have operations running without proper oversight, contractors operating as if they're above the law, officials who've forgotten that they serve the public, not the other way around." "I'm aware." "We're forming a special oversight division, independent investigators with clearance to examine any operation, any contractor, any official, people who can't be bought or intimidated, people who actually give a damn about doing the right thing." Tessa saw where this was going. "You want me to join?" "I want you to lead it. You'd have authority to investigate any operation you deem suspicious. Full federal backing, a team of investigators reporting directly to you." "I'm not an investigator. I'm EOD. You're someone who sees things other people miss, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. That's exactly what this division needs." Tessa sat back, processing the offer. Part of her wanted to say no. She'd spent the last year fighting just to survive. She was tired. She wanted peace. But another part of her, the part that had joined the military in the first place, understood that peace came with a price, that someone had to stand up and do the hard work of keeping the system honest. "I need to think about it," Tessa said. "Take your time, but not too much time. There are already operations we need investigated. Contractors who think the Redstone verdict was a fluke. Officials who think they can go back to business as usual. And if I say yes, then you make sure they understand it wasn't a fluke, that there are consequences for corruption, that nobody is untouchable. Tessa left the meeting with more questions than answers. She called Morrison, who told her she'd be crazy to turn down the offer. She called Catherine, who said it was exactly the kind of work her father would have wanted someone to do. She even called her sister, who listened quietly before saying, "Do you want to do it?" Tessa thought about that, about what she wanted. For 11 months, she'd wanted to disappear, to be invisible, to avoid the fights that had already cost her so much. But invisibility wasn't freedom. It was just another kind of prison. "Yeah," Tessa said. "I think I do." 3 months later, she stood in a conference room on the 5th floor of the Justice Department building, looking at the 12 investigators she'd been given to staff her new division. They were a mix of former military, retired law enforcement, and career civil servants who'd grown tired of watching the system fail. Morrison was there too, promoted to deputy director over his protests. Catherine had joined as chief analyst, using the skills she'd learned investigating her father's death to examine new cases. Rains had transferred from his military command to serve as tactical operations coordinator. When Tessa had asked why, he'd shrugged and said, "Because I'm tired of watching good people get screwed by bad leadership." They had a dozen active investigations already. Defense contractors billing for services never rendered. Intelligence officials running unauthorized surveillance programs. Military personnel taking kickbacks from foreign governments. The work was going to be brutal. They'd make enemies, powerful enemies who'd fight back hard. But for the first time in a long time, Tessa felt like she was doing something that mattered. Not just surviving, not just hiding, actually making a difference. She stood at the head of the conference table, looking at her team. "Most of you know why you're here. You've seen what happens when nobody's watching. When the people who are supposed to protect us decide that rules don't apply to them. We're here to change that." She pulled up a screen showing their active case files. "These investigations are going to be hard. The people we're going after have resources, connections, and lawyers who get paid more in a week than we make in a year. They're going to claim we're on a witch hunt, that we're politically motivated, that we don't understand how the real world works. Let them claim whatever they want. We're not here to make friends. We're here to do our jobs. And if we do them right, some very powerful people are going to end up in prison." Morrison spoke up from the back. "What's our first move?" "We start with the low-hanging fruit, cases where the evidence is already solid. We get convictions, build credibility, show people we're serious. Then we go after the bigger targets. And if they come after us, then we document it, prosecute it, and add it to the list of charges. Witness intimidation is a felony. Let them try." The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, everyone understood their assignments. They filed out one by one until only Tessa and Morrison remained. "You really think we can pull this off?" Morrison asked. "I don't know, but I think we have to try. Your sister called me yesterday, wanted to know if you were really okay. What'd you tell her?" "That you're doing what you need to do, and that she should be proud of you." Tessa smiled despite herself. "Thanks." "For what?" "For not letting me stay invisible." Morrison stood to leave, then paused at the door. "You know, when we were in that warehouse with Vance, I thought we were done, that we'd fought our way through all of it just to die in some industrial district nobody would remember. But we didn't die. No, we didn't. And now we're here, doing something that actually matters. That's not nothing." "No, it's not." After Morrison left, Tessa stood alone in the conference room, looking out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, operations were running that shouldn't be. People were being exploited, betrayed, killed in the name of national security or corporate profit. For most of her life, she'd believed that the system would eventually correct itself, that good people would rise to positions of power and fix the problems. But Bagdara had taught her otherwise. The system didn't fix itself. It protected itself. And the only way to change it was to force accountability from the outside. She pulled out her phone and opened the contact for Lieutenant Marcus Drain. He'd recovered fully from the poisoning and returned to active duty, though he still sent updates every few weeks. She typed a message, started the new job, going after the people who think they're untouchable. "Wish me luck." His response came quickly. "You don't need luck. You need body armor and a good lawyer. But knowing you, you've already got both. Give them hell." Tessa smiled and pocketed the phone. She gathered her files, locked the conference room, and then headed for the elevator. Tomorrow would bring new investigations, new challenges. New fights against people who'd spent lifetimes avoiding consequences. But tonight, she'd go home to her apartment. A real apartment now, not a safe house or a hotel room. She'd call her sister and actually talk about something other than survival. She'd sleep without checking the locks 3 times or keeping a weapon within reach. Because she wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding, wasn't waiting for someone else to fix the problems she'd witnessed. She was the person doing the fixing now, and that made all the difference. 6 months into the job, her division had secured 14 convictions and launched 23 new investigations. They'd exposed a defense contractor overcharging the government by millions. They'd caught an intelligence officer selling classified information to foreign buyers. They'd dismantled a network of corrupt military officials taking kickbacks from suppliers. The work was brutal, exactly as Tessa had predicted. They received threats regularly, legal challenges constantly. Political pressure from officials who wanted certain investigations dropped. But they kept going. Because every conviction sent a message. Every exposure proved that accountability still mattered. Every case reminded people that there were still those willing to stand up when it was easier to look away. Tessa sat in her office late one evening, reviewing files for a case that was going to trial next month. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "This is Hale." Staff Sergeant, or should I say Director Hale now. The voice was older, cultured, vaguely familiar. "You don't know me, but I've been watching your work with great interest." "Who is this?" "Someone who made the mistake of underestimating you once. I won't make that mistake again." "If this is a threat, it's not a threat. It's a compliment. You've done more damage to certain operations in 6 months than anyone else managed in 6 years. That's impressive. Damage is the point. I'm sure it is. But you should understand something. Redstone is gone, but the work continues. There are always organizations willing to do what governments can't publicly acknowledge. You shut down one, 3 more take its place." "Then I guess I'll be busy." The caller chuckled. "I suppose you will. Goodbye, Director Hale. I'm sure we'll speak again." The line went dead. Tessa stared at her phone for a long moment, then set it down. She'd expected this, known that bringing down Redstone wouldn't end the fight, just change its shape. But that was okay. Because she wasn't the same person who'd worked 3rd shift at Blackridge Trauma Center, hoping nobody would notice her. She wasn't the soldier who'd disappeared after Baghdara, too scared to fight back. She was someone who'd learned that the only way to survive wasn't to hide from the fight. It was to take the fight to them first. And she was just getting started. Tessa closed her laptop, gathered her things, and walked out of the office. The building was mostly empty this late, just security personnel and a few other workaholics burning the midnight oil. Outside, the night air was cold and clear. She walked to her car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. Somewhere in this city, and in cities across the country and around the world, people were making decisions that would cost lives, running operations that would never see oversight, believing they were untouchable because they always had been. They were wrong. Tessa started the car and pulled out of the parking garage, heading home through streets that felt safer somehow. Not because the threats had disappeared, but because someone was finally watching, finally holding the line between power and accountability. And that someone had learned the hardest way possible that silence wasn't safety. It was complicity. She'd been invisible once, overlooked, dismissed. Never again. The city lights blurred past her window as she drove, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Tessa felt something that wasn't just survival or determination. She felt purpose, and that, more than any verdict or conviction, was the real victory.